Hello everyone, welcome to What If Deku was Symbiote and bonded with Midnight Movie 1. Before we start, please go support PresidentThanos for writing that awesome fanfic. Nemuri Kayama, A.K.A Midnight, finally gets a break from the chaos that is Class 1A when they leave to go to a summer training camp. At least that's what was supposed to happen. Instead, her life gets turned upside down as soon as their bus leaves, and by a puddle of green goo no less. In this version of the MHA story, Izuku Midoriya has a quirk which I'm sure you've already guessed, and Shinso's the lucky guy who gets OFA. Chapter 1: Broken Windows. The start of an engine was heard from the office of one Nemuri Kayama, or Midnight as most know her as. She gets up, walks over to her window, and chuckles while watching the last of the famous Class 1A get on the bus to hell. A smile grows across her face as she prepares to be free from their chaos for the rest of summer vacation. Midnight sits back down at her desk to finish grading the written portions of finals from students who had to make up the test. She once again thought back to UA's class of problematic heroes in training and how they'd all grown, or stayed the same in some cases. Koda had come out of his shell during the final, Todoroki had finally started using his flames after the sports festival, and that Shinso kid had learned to not hurt himself with his mysterious super strength quirk that popped out of nowhere during the entrance exam. But as mentioned earlier, not all of them had changed. Bakugo was as hot-headed as ever and his anger seemed limitless. Mineta's pervertedness seemed to grow by the day, and Kaminari wasn't making any progress with his short-circuiting problem. She felt responsible, as one of their teachers, to try and help them however she could, but everything she thought of was a bust. Nothing except large amounts of therapy would help Bakugo and Mineta, and the only way for Kaminari to fix his problem would seem to be to learn how to use his quirk in a completely different way. All this thinking was starting to make her head hurt, so she got up and left her office for the first time in hours to get some fresh air and maybe something to eat from lunch rush. She could feel the sweat that had been building up in her suit make it cling to her even more than it usually did. Midnight was too focused on what I wanted to eat that she had failed to notice that the small, white-furred, mammal chimera thing that was her boss started walking with her. Nezu. You know, if you're really that worried about 1A, I could always assign you to a few of their heroics classes. Midnight jumped as the small rodent surprised her and nearly tripped because of it, but she was able to find her balance again. Midnight. I swear I'll find a way to get you back for that someday. She paused as she fully comprehended what he had just said. Midnight. Wait. How do you know what I was thinking about? Nezu chuckles. It was written all over your face, and I'm sure that if mine was as readable as yours you would have said something about it too. Nezu then enters his office as they walk past, leaving Nemuri to walk to the cafeteria in silence once again. Slight time skip. She had just sat down with the ramen she received from lunch rush when she felt a vibration from her phone. When she looked at it, it turned out to be a video from her close friend, Shota Aizawa, otherwise known as Eraserhead. The video consisted of all the students of Class 1A getting thrown off a cliff with Pixie Bob's quirk and Aizawa cackling like a madman. She put the phone away after texting with her reaction to the video, and she finished eating her food. 3-hour time skip. She was back in her office enjoying a nice cup of tea to relax after spending most of her day being cooped up in the smallest office in the school. Not that she was complaining, she had asked for the office specifically, but it did have its drawbacks. She turned around to her window to enjoy the view of the city, which was the sole reason she wanted the office, but saw something unusual. A small dot over the city seemed to be getting bigger. She was about to run out to alert Nezu of a possible attack when she realized the dot wasn't getting bigger, but grown closer, and fast. By the time she realized this, it was too late. The dot had become a semi-spherical blob, and that blob broke through the window of the office, and landed with a splat on the floor. After a few seconds had passed, Nemuri had decided that whatever this goo was, it had to be disposed of. She would clean it up and throw it in the trash. She then shrieked when the green slop started to move, but something was off. It was as if it was confused, dazed, like it had just been thrown through a window. This confused Nemuri, as the only mutant-type quirks she had ever seen allowed the user to stay at least somewhat humanoid. Maybe it was an emitter type and the controller of the goo was drunk. She was once again too lost in thought to be able to pay attention to her surroundings. The goo latched onto her legs, which knocked her out of her thoughts as she started to try and kick it off. Midnight. Arg! Get off of me! The goo didn't listen, it kept climbing with what almost looked like desperation. This once again brought confusion the R-rated hero's mind as the goo kept covering her. It was up to her neck now, and she couldn't reach her phone or the emergency villain alarm button on the other side of the room. Not even her very own somnambulist gas seemed to do anything other than deter the creature for a couple seconds. It slowly wrapped itself around her head. Nemuri, this is it, this is how I die. Inside of a weird green goop monster. There's probably worse. I just wish I could have had more time to help them. Help who? New friends. Help who? Midnight, you can hear my thoughts? Yeah, I can. Wait. Midnight, wait for what? Midnight then felt something dig a little deeper into her mind. Oh my god, you're Midnight. Midnight, yeah I am, but who are you? Oh, I'm so sorry. My name's Izuku Midoriya. I'm a huge fan. Midnight quietly chuckled at the excitement of the sentient goo. Midnight, as much as I like to meet my fans, I would like to know why you're wrapped around me and why you seemed so desperate to do so. Izuku, oh well, you see it's a side effect of my quirk, Symbiote. I'm stuck in this goop form and can't eat anything. I need a host to live off of, and it's been a couple of days since my last one kicked me out. Go ahead and call me a disgusting parasite. I'm used to it, just please let me stay for a couple hours. Midnight, why would I call you that? And it's fine, if you really need this then you can stay as long as you want. Izuku, really? Thank you, oh yeah, hold on section. Nemuri felt the slimy boy squirm and wiggle his way into her body, and she was finally able to see again. Midnight. Wow, this is some pretty cool quirk you got here, Midoriya. Izuku, really? No one's ever told me that before. Only that I'm gross, disgusting, a parasite. So thank you for that. Midnight. It's no problem, Midoriya. You sound pretty young to be all by yourself though. How old are you? Izuku, old that. I do believe I'm 16 though my months could be a bit off. Midnight. You're only 16? Isn't there anyone out there who cares for you? Izuku, no there isn't. My mom was the only family I had after my dad left, but she died 4 years ago when our apartment complex was crushed in a villain attack. Midnight. Well, from what I'm hearing you need a lot of help. How about you stay with me? I'll be your host, and you can help me with whatever I need. Sound like a plan? Izuku, deal, I won't let you down, Ms. Midnight. Midnight chuckles. Since we're sharing a body, why don't you just call me Kayama? Izuku then forms his head out of her shoulder to speak out loud. Izuku. Okay, I will Kayama. Nemuri then ruffles the green hair of her slimy teenage acquaintance. Midnight. By the way, what else can you do? Izuku. Oh, I can form around you like a second hero's suit, and I can even mimic your costume. But it would look a bit different, and your face wouldn't be visible. We would also grow taller due to how much of me there really is. I can also create tendrils and my own version of spider silk that's way stronger. Midnight. Wow. That's amazing, Midoriya. How would you like to join the hero course here at UA? Well, we'd obviously have to go through Nezu first, but I think it's possible. Izuku, crying tears of joy. I've always wanted to be a hero, so yes and thank you so much. He then retracts into Nemuri once more. Midnight. Well, let's go see him then, Midoriya. She couldn't see it, but she could feel his equivalent of a nod. 1 hour time skip. Nemuri had explained Izuku's situation to Nezu and was currently awaiting a response. Nezu. So you're telling me that the slimy head of a teenager connected to your shoulder wishes to join our hero course a quarter of the way through the year? Midnight and Izuku, yes. Nezu sighs and takes a sip of his tea to clear his head. Nezu. Well, from what I've heard from the two of you, I can't find a reason to say no, but I'll have to move a general studies student into the other hero class. Midnight suddenly remembered a GS student who made it to the finals of the sports festival. Midnight. What about that American student from GS with the strength enhancer quirk that made it to the finals with a shield? Nezu immediately went to his computer to find said student. Nezu. One Steve Rogers. That's not a bad idea. Now all we have to figure out is which class Midoriya here will join. Izuku. If it isn't too much trouble, I'd like to be in Class 1A. I heard Eraserhead is their teacher. Nezu. Very well then, Class 1A it is and Mr. Rogers will go to 1B. Oh, and don't worry about getting separated from Midnight. We'll make sure that you're able to attend classes while bonded. Izuku. Thank you, both of you. I'm pretty tired, so I hope it's okay if I take a nap. He then slithers his way back into Midnight's shoulder and falls asleep. Midnight. You know it doesn't feel as weird as it looks. She giggles to herself a little as she gets up and leaves Nezu's office. Nemuri goes to her apartment to enjoy the peace that is her small vacation with a new friend, away from 1A. Peaceful rest. Nemuri had just gotten home and felt Izuku start to squirm, which she took as a sign he was waking up from the nap. Nemuri. Finally awake, huh? Izuku, staying solid while on the outside takes a lot out of me, Kayama. Nemuri giggles. I can tell. She walks further into her apartment until she comes across the kitchen where she gets ready to make dinner. Izuku, you're gonna have to make a little more than you usually would to accommodate for me being in here. Nemuri. I figured. You got any preferences? Izuku, not really. I wouldn't be able to taste it anyway. Nemuri. Katsudon it is then. Izuku, I used to love Katsudon, back before my quirk manifested at least. Nemuri. Well then maybe you could help me make it tonight. Izuku, sure thing. They then proceeded to make a mess of the kitchen as Izuku failed to catch ingredients Nemuri dropped, and the pot was knocked over on accident. Izuku, well that was a disaster. Nemuri. You think? They both laugh for a bit before getting up to clean the kitchen. 2-hour time skip. The kitchen was clean, and they had ordered a pizza to eat instead. After they were done eating, Nemuri had turned on the TV to watch a movie, but Izuku kept changing the channel using small tendrils that changed places every time she tried to stop him. Nemuri. Midoriya, I swear, if you don't stop I will not let you stay bonded during my showers. Izuku, I was gonna unbond from you before you went in anyway. As few would know, Midnight is actually an act put on by Nemuri, but as even fewer knew, some aspects had bled into her actual personality. Nemuri. Oh? So you think I'm not attractive enough to be seen in a shower? She had decided to tease the poor boy. Izuku, and no, it's not that. I just thought why you would like some form of privacy. His sudden nervousness and embarrassment was like candy for Nemuri's mind. But she decided the last thing she needed was a nervous wreck inside her head, so she calmed him down by assuring him that she was just messing with him. Time skipped to the next morning. Nemuri woke up like normal, except she felt like she was upright, and when she opened her eyes, she saw her stove. She had a small mirror next to her stove, and when she looked at it, she saw something that resembled her, but its eyes were big and all white, its mouth was huge with sharp teeth, and its tongue was super long and was waving in front of her face. Nemuri, what the hell? Izuku. Oh, you're awake? Finally. I hope you don't mind I made us breakfast. Izuku then uncovered her, and she sat down at her table. She then ate the best breakfast she'd had in months. Nemuri. As long as you make food this good every time, then I don't mind. Nemuri was getting up from her chair and she fell backwards, but instead of hitting the floor, a thick green slime shot towards the ceiling and caught her. Izuku then gently set her down on the floor. Nemuri. Thanks for the save. Izuku, what kind of body mate would I be if I didn't help you? She then giggled at his words and got up to go about her day. The next few days were spent with Nemuri and Izuku getting to know each other. During a trip to the store, multiple people could have sworn they saw green streaks picking up items, but when they investigated, all they saw was the all too innocent-looking Nemuri. Then one morning at 2 o'clock she got a phone call. Nemuri. Shoda? Aizawa. We were attacked. Chaos returns. Worry. The only word that could describe Nemuri's mind at the moment. And her worry was so strong that it started to make her body guess worry too, and about people he's only seen on TV. First, not only does she get a call 3 days into summer vacation that the training camp was attacked, barely even 2 days later, 5 students go rouge to save their classmate who was kidnapped by the League during the attack. Izuku was trying his best to keep her as calm as possible, which wasn't easy. Multiple times he had to restrain her himself to stop her from going to their homes to punish them herself. He even had to remind her that Nezu was implementing the dorms, which meant she could punish them whenever since they'd be 5 minutes away at all times. Time skipped to Aizawa and All Might visiting about the dorm system. Nemuri and Izuku are relaxing on the couch when a knock is heard at the door. Nemuri. They're here. Izuku, hold up. Wanna spook them? Nemuri debated about whether or not it was a good idea but decided she could use it as a way to relieve some stress. Nemuri. Yeah, let's do it. Aizawa and All Might were waiting in front of her door for a few minutes and were about to leave, but then the door slowly creaked open. Both. Well, that's not ominous at all. They then proceeded to walk inside of the dark apartment. They noticed cobwebs in the corners and a small mess in the kitchen. A noise was heard, coming from further into the apartment. They looked into the small hallway and immediately saw what made the noise. It was a creature straight from the nightmares of many people. 8 feet tall, sharp teeth and claws, white eyes that seemed to glow, long snake-like tongue, and 6 tendrils all originating from its back. They were preparing to run, when they heard a semi-familiar cackle of laughter come from the thing. It was largely feminine but deepened and slightly garbled, as if it was coming through a liquid. Aizawa. Nemuri? Now that it was said, they could see the similarities in the creature's body and her hero costume. Nemuri garbled. Ding ding ding, you're correct, Shota. Izuku then uncovered Nemuri and sent a tendril out to turn on the lights. The 2 now only kinda scared grown men were speechless. Nemuri. What? Am I really that beautiful? Come sit down so we can talk. They did as told but still didn't say a thing. Eventually Shota decided to speak up. Aizawa. So just what the hell was that, Nemuri? All Might. And where's the new student Nezu told me about? Nemuri chuckled at their confusion. Nemuri. Well, you see, the answers to both of those questions are actually the same answer. Midoriya, do you think you could come out real fast? The confusion on the 2 men's faces grew until a small patch of green goo grew on and extended from her shoulder, and the head of a green-haired teenager slowly formed at the end. Izuku. All right, I'm out, Kayama. What do they need? Aizawa. Are you by any chance Izuku Midoriya, kid? Izuku looked at him and saw confusion and surprise still lingering on his face. Izuku. Yes, I am, and from the looks of things I'd say that you're Shota Aizawa, also known as my new teacher. Aizawa. You'd be correct. Now if you don't mind, do you think you could explain why you're attached to Nemuri's shoulder? Izuku. That's a bit of a story that I don't feel like telling right now. Nemuri. I'll tell it for you, okay? But you cook dinner tonight. Izuku. That sounds like a deal to me. I'll see you later. He then retracted and decided a small nap was in order. Nemuri then waited for him to fall asleep before talking again. All Might. So you gonna tell us or what? While he didn't say anything, Aizawa too was beginning to lose his patience. Nemuri. I was waiting for him to fall asleep. Manifesting his head like that takes more energy than you'd think. But since he is now, I'll tell you how it happened. The next half hour was spent with Nemuri telling the story and having to repeat several parts multiple times, not for All Might to understand, but for Shota. Aizawa. I am still completely confused, but I guess that'll only change with time. All that's left is to ask you if you're okay with moving into the 1A dorms so he can be with the class. Are you? Nemuri. If it means he gets to be with the class and I get to eat his food, then yeah, I'm fine with it. Aizawa. That's all I needed to hear. We'll see the 2 of you in a week on moving day then. Enjoy the peace and quiet of the apartment while you can. Oh, and tell Midoriya to think of a hero name while you're packing. All Might and Aizawa then left the apartment, and the body sharers to their own devices. In just 1 week, Izuku will take his first step towards his dream of being a hero. Later that night, Nemuri lay awake, trying to figure out how she's going to be able to handle being with 1A 24/7. Unbeknownst to her, Izuku was also awake, and focusing on a problem of his own. Meeting the class. Excitement was the only thing that could describe the feeling Izuku was experiencing. Nemuri was also excited, partially because Izuku's mood can affect hers, but mostly because she can finally punish those 5 specific students. A moving truck had appeared out front of her apartment building and she packed everything she needed into it to be taken to the dorms. She also packed a few hero posters to give Izuku some form of personal expression in their room. Moving day was the day after, so they had time to relax before the big move. The next day, Nemuri was walking towards the 1A dorms having a small conversation about who in 1A to be careful of or to ignore completely when she saw the whole of 1A standing outside the dorm building and listening to Aizawa. Once he was done talking, she walked up behind the students and decided to make herself known. Nemuri, loudly. So I assume Aizawa told you all off about the impromptu rescue mission? Good, I'll be punishing the 5 of you who went myself. And before you ask, yes, I'll be living in the 1A dorms for 2 reasons, to keep an eye on you all, and you'll find out the second reason the first A class starts back up again. Mineta looked as if he had been personally invited to heaven once he heard that. The rest of the students were either confused, excited, curious, or indifferent towards the new information. But Shinso looked at her with suspicion, as if he could sense something the others couldn't. This didn't go unnoticed as Nemuri, Izuku, and Aizawa noticed and decided to talk to him later. Once Aizawa gained the attention of the class again, he led them into the building. He gave them the basic information such as boys on the left and girls on the right. They all went to decorate their rooms, but Nemuri and Aizawa pulled Shinso to the side. Nemuri. All right, what's with the look? Shinso. Well, during the Kamino battle my brainwashed quirk evolved and now I can sense the minds of the people around me. So I was just surprised when I sensed 2 separate consciousnesses within you, Ms. Midnight. Nemuri. That is part of the second reason I'm here, so just wait until classes start for your answer. Shinso nodded and left to go decorate his room with the others. Nemuri left soon after to decorate their room too. After the class was done with their rooms, a pink girl by the name of Mina Ashido suggested they all do a room competition, which Ajiri and Bakugo decided to not participate in. They went through all the students' rooms and were about to call the winner when Ashido spoke up. Ashido. Ms. Midnight, we haven't seen your room yet, would it be okay? Nemuri. Sure it is. The class then went into Midnight's room to see that the only things she added were a dresser, a lamp with different color lights, a different bed, and some unexpected hero posters. Ashido. I'm going to be honest, I expected something more, Midnighty. Nemuri. Midnight isn't my entire personality, you know. It's a mask to help differentiate between Midnight and my actual life. Most of you will develop a hero persona at some point too. They then left to declare the winner of the competition, which was of course, Sato, since he made cake. Nemuri then decided Izuku could use some time to talk. While he had given his opinion of a few rooms, she couldn't respond to him at all or risk exposing him before his introduction. Nemuri. So what did you think of them all? Izuku then materialized on her shoulder as usual. Izuku. They all seem nice enough. Bakugo could probably calm down a little, and I really don't like that Mineta guy. Nemuri chuckled a little at his declaration but yawned afterwards. Izuku. Yeah, I'm tired too. Good night, Kayama. He went back in and started to fall asleep. Nemuri. Good night, Midoriya. She then laid down and fell asleep as well. The next few days consisted of Izuku observing the class and Nemuri punishing the BRS Bakugo Rescue Squad. Today was the day. Classes were starting back up and Izuku would officially become part of Class 1A. All the students of 1A were sitting in their desks waiting for Aizawa and wondering why there was an extra desk up front. Their teacher entered the room after a minute with Nemuri alongside him. This confused the students as they thought she would only be supervising them in the dorms. Aizawa. Alright, I'm sure you all want to know why we have a new desk and why Midnight is here. To answer the first example, we will have a new student joining us from today on. Midnight herself will answer your questions. The room then exploded with questions and Nemuri was able to answer a few but not all. After the room quieted back down, she spoke up once again. Nemuri. As you know, there are 2 reasons that I've been moved into your dorms. The first was to keep track of you, and the second has to do with your new classmate. The faces of the entire class turned into masks of confusion. Nemuri. It'll be easier to show you than to tell you. Midoriya, come on out. The familiar feeling of Izuku manifesting from her shoulder was felt, but she could tell it was faster and more forced. His excitement was barely being contained. Izuku. Hi there everyone, I'm Izuku Midoriya. It's nice to meet you. Introductions and preparations. Izuku. Hi there everyone, I'm Izuku Midoriya. It's nice to meet you. The room was dead quiet as the class tried to process what they were looking at. A green slimy substance emerged from their teacher's shoulder and formed into the head of a boy their age. Izuku. Is everything okay? Did I do something wrong? Nemuri, sensing the unease in her companion, spoke up. Nemuri. Just give it a minute, Midoriya. Izuku nodded and she felt him calm down a little. Then the class erupted into even more questions, which were now able to be answered since Izuku showed himself. They were told of his unique situation and why Nemuri will be joining in some of their classes and privately tutoring Izuku in ones she couldn't attend. Mineta had to leave the room because his perverted questions about him and Nemuri caused him to become too embarrassed and nervous to speak. Once he calmed down, so did the class, and the questions slowed down with them. Kirishima. What's your hero name? Or do you still have to make one? Izuku. Actually, I already have one. I'm the symbiote hero, Venom. Since the form that appears when I cover a host looks pretty scary, I thought I'd embrace that. Kirishima. Pretty manly. I like it. Most of homeroom went on with the class asking questions and Nemuri answering most of them since Izuku went back in to preserve energy. But the class did eventually settle down for Aizawa to get their attention once more. Aizawa. As you all know, your training camp was interrupted. What you didn't know was that it was supposed to prepare you for the professional licensing exam in a week. So to further prepare you, you will be creating ultimate moves here at UA. Please save your questions for when we reach Gym Gamma. Put on your hero suits and go. While most of the class went to get changed, Nemuri followed Aizawa. Nemuri. We both know that with his quirk, Midoriya's moves will completely depend on his host's abilities. And since I'm the only one he seems to want to be bonded to, he might not be able to take the exam. Aizawa sighed. You're right, as usual. Nezu has a solution to that. What it is what I don't know. Both Nemuri and Izuku grew curious about what this solution might be, but knowing Nezu, it's definitely going to be creative. They walked the rest of the way in silence. Once they got there, they waited for the students to arrive. Once they did, Aizawa described what ultimate moves are, how some students had already developed them, and how they could go to the support department for costume changes. The class then got to work. Instead of developing ultimate moves, Nemuri and Izuku worked on the moves of their Venom form, as they'd taken to calling it. They even sparred with some of the class, and OT was clear that with the flexibility of Midnight combined with the added strength and tendrils of Venom, they were in a class of their own. Kirishima could barely block a punch, Ida couldn't keep up, Izuku was able to spot Hagakure's boots when Nemuri wasn't paying attention, and not even the ranged fighters were safe when they figured out how to channel Nemuri's somnambulist through Izuku's tendrils. Pretty soon most of the class had fought and lost against the seemingly unstoppable duo. All that were left were Bakugo, Todoroki, and Jiro. Venom Knight, both voices combined. 17 down, 3 to go. Come at us whenever you're ready. That was a mistake. Bakugo leapt forward with an explosion, he then tried to hit them with another, and they dodged last second. What none of them expected was Izuku nearly ripping himself out of Nemuri involuntarily. The students didn't stop. Todoroki and Jiro both attacked at once, and the combined heat and sound waves ripped Izuku out and threw him to the other side of the gym. Nemuri, in slight pain, Midoriya. He couldn't speak in his slime form, but she lived with him long enough to know that the way he was moving meant he was distressed and panicking. She rushed over to him and stuck her hand out. He covered it and started to bond to her once again. Once he was inside, she could feel just how much the attack messed with him. He was moving carefully, as if he didn't trust his own body. Izuku, what was that? Nemuri. I think we just found your weakness. But let's just go relax for the rest of the day, okay? He agreed and they left with Nemuri telling Aizawa about what happened. He agreed they should take the rest of the day off. They relaxed at the dorms for a few hours before making dinner for the class and explaining what happened too. Time skipped to night. Nemuri had laid down an hour ago, but was having trouble falling asleep, as was Izuku. Izuku, I'm sorry if the separation hurt at all. Nemuri. It's fine, that's not what's bothering me anyway. He then manifested to talk to her face to face. Izuku. What is then? Nemuri sighs. You looked and felt so frightened when it happened, almost like you've been forcefully separated before. She noticed a saddened look come across his face. Izuku. As you know, I had to survive off of other hosts, while none of them really wanted to keep me around. My weaknesses to heat and sound were always found eventually. The reason I didn't tell you was that I was scared you would get rid of me as soon as you could. So really I should be saying thank you for coming over to me. Nemuri. I understand now. You don't have to worry though, I promise I won't get rid of you. As she said that, her tiredness caught up with her and she started to fall asleep. Izuku noticed this and retracted himself. Though right before she fell asleep she heard something in her mind. Izuku, good night Nemuri. Special exams? The week had passed, the students were ready, they were all standing outside the exam building, and Nezu still hadn't told the bodymates how Izuku would get his license. Nemuri. He's cutting it a little close, don't you think? Izuku, you're right. Needless to say, they were getting a little impatient with the rodent. Almost as if on cue, the tiny principal of UA showed up right before Nemuri walked inside. Nezu. Actually, you two won't be with them, though you will see them later on. Come with me. They walked away from the class and were led to a small room with a desk inside. Nezu motioned for her to sit down, so she did. Nezu. Your test will be different. The first portion consists of a written portion, which is to be done by Midoriya alone. Midnight may help, but it has to be written by him. You will learn what your second portion will be after you're done here. He then left the room and the signal to begin the test went off. The written test wasn't that hard. In fact, the hardest part was Izuku trying to hold the pencil and write with it. She did have to hold the paper and help with a couple questions. Once they were done, a member of the hero committee came in and took the test paper. He then motioned for her to follow him, so she did. While they were walking, Nemuri and Izuku had a small debate over what they might have to do. They arrived to a gym-sized room filled with people in what looked like matching villain outfits and concrete launchers in their arms. Gang Orca was also seen at the far wall leaning on it. Committee member. Your second part of the test will be helping Gang Orca's villains attack the hero course students who are currently saving HUC members from rubble and debris. This announcement caused Go to look up and walk over to them. Go. So you're the one I was told would be helping me. I thought it would be a student. Izuku then manifested. Izuku. That would be me, sir. Nice to meet you. To save energy for the exam, he went back in. Go looked at Nemuri confused. Nemuri. It's his quirk. He needs to be attached to a host to be effective, and I'm the only one he wants to be bonded to right now. That's why we're here. Go nodded with a small grunt and went back to leaning on the far wall. To prepare for the attack, Izuku venomized Nemuri. The sudden appearance of the 8-feet-tall Venom Knight spooked the costumed minions. They walked up to Go to wait for the signal. When it finally came, Go used his sonic pulse to destroy the wall. The minions all rushed out and Go challenged the heroes. The students from 1A that could see the explosion went wide-eyed when they saw Venom Knight walk out of the dust cloud with tendrils at the ready and somnambulist gas leaking through them and their mouth. They jumped towards a group of students and landed with a shriek. Once they hit the ground, they immediately started to take down students from other schools. While some were knocked out by their gas, others had been given gas masks from Yorozu and had to be taken down by hand, which wasn't much of a problem for Venom Knight. They were flipping over students and hitting them with their tendrils. One with an invisibility quirk similar to Hagakure's was about to hit them when Izuku sensed them, and hit them with 4 tendrils, knocking them out. A large amount of students were unconscious when a massive amount of heat was felt by all. Venom Knight recognized the heat and looked towards it. A large tornado of Todoroki's fire was standing, and they could see Go in between the flames. Izuku retreated into Nemuri to protect himself from the heat. Nemuri then rushed over and put Todoroki and the student with the wind quirk to sleep with Somnambulist. Once the heat died down, Izuku emerged and venomized Nemuri once more. Venom Knight yelling, "Your biggest assets have just been killed by us villains, stand down, and we might just let you live." Most of the students froze at the declaration, but a few kept moving, and one familiar purple-haired student went to kick Venom Knight but was blocked by Gang Orca's arm bracer, which cracked it. Exam Proctor, over PA system. The exam is now over. All civilians are safe and accounted for. Please proceed to the locker rooms to change and follow your teachers to the meeting hall. Izuku retracted and Nemuri walked over to the hall. The participants were informed of the scoring system, and when Nemuri looked at the board, she didn't see Izuku's name. Nemuri. Oh, come on. I thought we did pretty good. She was then handed paper that stated that he passed, which only confused her more until Nezu came up. Nezu. The reason he isn't up there is because he didn't participate in the regular exam, but don't worry. He'll still get his license. Nemuri felt two separate waves of relief flow through her. Izuku, thank God. Nemuri chuckles. I can assure you that we're both very relieved. The students all went back to their buses. Nemuri was trying to think of a way to reward Izuku for passing the exam. Izuku was thinking of something to celebrate as well. They all went to sleep happy that night. Party shenanigans. It was the next day. To say 1A was ecstatic about getting their licenses would be an understatement. They were too energetic for Aizawa's liking, so he spoke up. Aizawa, how about this? I'll let you throw a party tonight. And before you get even more excited, Midnight will be here to keep an eye on you all. Instead of exploding in cheers like they normally would, they all nodded at their teacher and started planning. That was when Nemuri came down from her room with confusion on her face as to why they weren't accidentally hurting each other out of excitement yet. Aizawa explained the party, and she just nodded as Izuku took over. For the few minutes, all that could be seen from the kitchen as Venom Knight cooking the best breakfast anyone had ever seen. After Nemuri ate, she helped the class plan the party and made sure to keep Kaminari and Mineta off of the shopping team. The rest of the day consisted of the class preparing for the party and sending Nemuri off to invite 1B who had also passed the other licensing exam. Kendo, Tetsu, and Shiozaki ended up having to drag Monoma out of his room to get him to accept. It all went as planned. The drinks and snacks were bought, the music was selected, the common space of the 1A dorms was cleared out, and games were brought out. Currently, Nemuri was in the support department trying to get Hatsum to come to the party. Nemuri. Hatsum, you've made improvements to over half of their hero suits, and Shinso's practically your best friend. It would mean a lot to them if you'd come. Unfortunately, her pleas fell on deaf ears, for Hatsum was once again focused on her babies, as she called them. Eventually, Nemuri just left an invitation in her toolbox and left the room, only to be approached by an oddly awake and semi-concerned looking Aizawa. Nemuri. Whoa. What's the occasion, Shota? Did Joke finally get you to agree to marry her? Aizawa grew a more stern expression in reaction to the mention of Ms. Joke. Aizawa. No, actually, I need to know if Izuku's awake right now. As Nemuri shook her head no, Aizawa sighed and looked as if he was composing himself to tell someone their mom died. Aizawa. Good, as you know, his quirk allows him to bond to hosts. And as mature as he is for his age, he's still just a teenager. Nemuri nodded along, not exactly looking forward to where this conversation was going. Aizawa. Well, during one of your visits to Recovery Girl to keep track of his health, she came across something that could be concerning. He paused, seemingly just to add suspense, which she wasn't exactly a fan of at the moment. Nemuri. Spit it out already. Aizawa. Okay, here goes. We were able to get a read on his brain waves while he was sleeping. They were similar to someone with crippling separation anxiety. We believe that his quirk and his past experiences have combined to make him extremely terrified to be separated from you. We took this to Hound Dog, and he's pretty sure that this condition can't be fixed. You're most likely gonna be stuck with him for the rest of your life. He looked up at her, expecting her to look concerned or at least even a little confused, but she didn't. In fact, it looked like she had just confirmed something. Nemuri. I knew something like this would happen. I could already feel his fear of separation. Even if he wasn't, I was prepared to spend the rest of my life with him here. I promised I would always be there to help him, and I don't intend to break that promise. Aizawa could have sworn he saw a small blush on her face when she said the last sentence, but she turned around and walked away too fast for him to see. Aizawa. Heh. Good luck with her, kid. Time skipped to the party. All the guests had arrived, even Hatsum came, much to Nemuri's surprise. The night was going great. Everyone was having fun. Mineta was attached to a ceiling fan, Kaminari tried and failed to flirt with the 1B girls, and just ended up hanging around Jiro for the rest of the night. But Nemuri was in her own little world for most of the party, trying to come to terms with something she had been feeling for the last week. Ever since she and Izuku got separated, she never wanted him to go again, and without her knowledge, he was feeling the same. He never wanted to leave his hosts, but she felt different. Like they belonged together. Like they were truly symbiotic. They were both trying to find a way to tell the other when Nemuri tripped and started to fall from her position on the stairs. Izuku managed to catch her as he usually does, but this time it felt different to Nemuri, as if he caught her more gently than he usually did. When he put her down, she was blushing up a storm, and she walked out of the dorms to clear her head and clammed down. She sat down on a bench after walking for a minute. Izuku then manifested on her shoulder. Izuku. Is everything okay, Kayama? Nemuri could have sworn she saw the remnants of a blush similar to hers fade from his face. Nemuri. We need to have a talk, Midoriya. Izuku looked worried but nodded his head for her to go on. Nemuri. Earlier I was told something that confirmed a suspicion I've had for a while. One time when we visited Recovery Girl and you were asleep, you exhibited brain activity that was extremely similar to severe separation anxiety. Izuku looked as if he finally got an answer to a question he had. Izuku. I always figured I had that. Nemuri nodded, then continued. Nemuri. When this was brought to Hound Dog, he said that based on the nature of your quirk and your past experiences, this may not be curable. So I wanted to make sure that you're okay with spending the rest of your life here in me. Izuku then looked confused. Izuku. Why wouldn't I be? You're nice and caring. You make me laugh and you're just generally fun to be with. Besides, I get to be one of the lucky few who get to know who Nemuri Kayama is, not just Midnight. I also really like fighting with you. When I'm with you, I feel like I've finally found someone I'm truly symbiotic with. All of these put together is why I like being your friend, and why I like you. Nemuri then had a flabbergasted look on her face. She wasn't expecting him to say something like that. She then started to blush all over again once she processed what he said. Nemuri. Hey, are you sure about that? I mean, thanks for the compliments, but really? I'm a 30-year-old hero and high school teacher. You're a 16-year-old student with your whole life ahead of you. Izuku. I'm 100% sure, Nemuri. I'm prepared for whatever challenges head our way. Nemuri. Okay, as long as you know what we're getting ourselves into. I like you too, Izuku Midoriya. They went in for a kiss. Their lips lightly pushed together. After a minute they separated. Then they heard a gasp, something moving, and saw Aizawa, President Mike, Ashido, Setsuna, and Hagakure fall out of a nearby bush. Them, surprise. Work studies. It was the morning after the party. Nemuri was relaxing in the common space, before anyone else was up, with Izuku's manifested head in her lap. She was playing with his hair as they talked. Izuku. Do you think they're going to tell Nezu? He was worried that Nemuri might lose her job because of their relationship. He and Nemuri may have punished the Stalker 5, as they had affectionately been named, but he was still worried they might spill about what they had seen, even on accident. Nemuri chuckled and kissed his forehead to calm him down. Nemuri. No, I don't think so, Izuku. I think we scared them enough last night. This put the worries of the green-haired symbiote to bed as he moved his head to kiss her, and she melted into the kiss. Aizawa then approached them. He was visibly limping from the whipping the couple did to him and the other for the night before. Aizawa. What are the two of you doing up right now? Nemuri. We could ask the same thing to you. Aizawa. I need 3 hours to prepare for a day of dealing with teenagers. We're also going to talk about work studies in class today. Izuku was about to ask about it but decided to wait for class. Izuku. We wanted to spend some time together before the rest of the class got up and we had to hide our relationship. Aizawa eyed the head. But eventually left, presumably to go make more coffee. The rest of the morning went by with Nemuri and Izuku spending more time together. Time skipped to class. Everyone was sitting in their seats waiting for Aizawa to start speaking. He then started to explain the work studies to the students and had the big three introduce themselves. Amajiki was as shy as ever and Hato was way too energetic. As she practically bounced around the room asking each student various questions, her sights were suddenly locked on to the R-rated hero sitting in a student's desk up front, and she hopped to her next. Hato. Hi, Ms. Midnight, why are you in a desk? Is this why there's less art lessons? I heard there was a unique student in 1A, are you them? She kept asking as many questions as possible, until Aizawa told Togata to get her under control. Togata then challenged the class to a fight to show how work study helps you grow. He then led them to Gym Gamma to fight him. And he demolished them. The only one to put up a fight was Shinso, who sensed where his mind went, but even he went down eventually. Just as Togata was about to declare his victory, he heard a voice that wasn't with them before. Izuku. I think you're forgetting someone. Togata turned to see Izuku's manifested head return to Nemuri. They then venomized and Togata was facing the toughest opponent he'd fought yet, Venom Knight. At first he looked shocked, then he smiled and got into a fighting stance. In reaction to him getting ready, 4 tendrils emerged from Venom Knight's back. Togata. I guess that's the answer to your question, Hato. He then slipped through the ground. Venom Knight, having watched the previous massacre of Class 1A, jumped into the air and emitted some somnambulist. Togata then appeared and went to punch Venom Knight, but his punch was caught. This caused him to lose focus and become solid again. He breathed in a little of the gas, which made him too tired to focus on becoming intangible, and Venom Knight slammed him into the ground, knocking him unconscious. When Togata woke up, he was in Recovery Girl's office. He asked her what happened, and she told him he got his ass kicked by Venom Knight. To say he was impressed was an understatement. Togata, sir, might like to have him on board. Nemuri and Izuku were having the closest thing to a date they could, which consisted of a home-cooked steak dinner in their room and a movie marathon while they cuddled, which consisted of a mostly venomized Nemuri, but instead of covering her head, Izuku manifested his on her shoulder. Afterwards they got ready to sleep. Izuku, did you like our little date? Nemuri. I loved it, Izuku, but not as much as I love you. Izuku appeared on her shoulder. Izuku. I love you too, Nemuri. He retracted as she laid down in bed. Nemuri, good night, Izuku. Izuku, good night, Nemuri. Nighteye. The couple are seen walking to the 1A classroom when Togata approached Nemuri. Togata. Hey, Ms. Midnight, I was wondering if Midoriya was thinking of doing a work study. With how the way the two of you fought, I'm sure Sir Nighteye would love to have him in the agency. Nemuri looked at him and thought for a second. Nemuri. 1 second, Togata. To Izuku. Can I tell him? Izuku, go ahead, just don't say anything about my past, please. Though I'd be happy to work with Sir Nighteye. Nemuri, got it, to Togata. I'm sorry, Togata, but his quirk causes him to feel extreme separation anxiety and fear being separated from a host he's symbiotic with. Since I'm the first one he's found, I'll have to go with him. If Nighteye can accept that, then he'd be glad to join. Togata held an understanding look and nodded. Togata. Why don't I introduce the two of you to him after school's over today? After conversing with Izuku, Nemuri agreed and she kept walking to the classroom. Time skipped to after school. Nemuri met up with Togata after informing Aizawa about where she was going and why. Shinso was also there with them, and a surprised look came on his face when he saw her. Togata explained to him why she was there and led them towards the train station. After a couple hours they got off the train and headed towards Sir Nighteye's agency. When they got there, Togata decided to speak up before heading inside. Togata. Alright, something you three should know about Sir is that he holds humor and energy in very high regards, so you should try and make him laugh. You don't have to, but it'll increase your odds of getting in a lot. Nemuri and Shinso nodded and went inside. Togata told the receptionist what they were here for and went upstairs towards Nighteye's office. Once they got to the office, they composed themselves and opened the door. They didn't expect to find Nighteye's sidekick, Bubble Girl, strapped to a tickle machine. Shinso, did we come at a bad time? They left the room as Togata helped Bubble Girl out of the contraption's restraints. Once he was out of the office, he explained how that was the punishment for not having enough energy while reporting to Nighteye. Nemuri, well, let's hope we have enough energy to satisfy him. Izuku, well, we have 2 people's worth of energy in one body. Nemuri, well, we might have to make up for Shinso. She heard him chuckle in her head at the joke. Shinso, I can't hear him, but I can still hear you, Ms. Midnight. They re-entered the office. Nighteye was now behind his desk. Sir, to Shinso. Ah, you must be one of the students Togata mentioned. To Nemuri. But why are you here? And where's the second student? Shinso could be heard snickering at his cluelessness, which caused Nighteye to raise an eyebrow in confusion. Sir, while I'm glad you have some humor, I don't see why my questions would be funny. Nemuri. Here's the answer to all of your questions. Come on out, Izuku. Nighteye then watches as Izuku's head manifests off of his shoulder. Izuku. Here I am, sir. I hope you don't mind the fact that she needs to be here too. Nighteye had an even more confused look on his face, which caused Shinso's snickering to become full-blown laughter, which in turn caused Nemuri and Izuku to start laughing as well. Once they calmed down, they explained Izuku's quirk to Nighteye along with how he won't be leaving Nemuri for a different host. Nighteye nodded along and seemed to understand. Sir, I see. However, because of your refusal to find a new host, I cannot hire you. Almost as if in response to his claim, Togata came back into the room. Togata. Sir, in their defense, they totally kicked my ass while venomized, at least I think that's what it's called, and Shinso was able to track where I was, even through the ground. This new information caused Sir to rethink his decision a little. Nighteye. Instead of me rejecting you, I'll give you a chance. We'll spar in my agency's training room in an hour. Now please leave, as I'd like to talk to Shinso here in private. Izuku retracted and Nemuri did as she was told and left the office with Togata. Izuku, I wonder what they're talking about. Nemuri. It's their business, they'll tell us if we need to know. Izuku acknowledged this answer and kept quiet for a little bit. For the next hour, Nemuri and Izuku wandered the agency and were even able to scare a few sidekicks while they were waiting for the spar session with Nighteye. Once the hour was up, they went to the training room to wait for Nighteye. When he showed up, Izuku immediately venomized Nemuri, sprouted some tendrils, and got into a fighting stance. Nighteye also got into a stance and tried to look into Venom Knight's eyes, but what he saw surprised him. Since they were completely symbiotic, Venom Knight's future was different from their individual futures, and it looked to Nighteye like they already suspected this. Izuku then uncovered Nemuri, who charged at Nighteye, who was just recovering from the fact he just found. She tried to hit him with her whip, but he was able to dodge backwards at the last second. He threw a few of his hyper-density seals, but those were deflected by a green tendril. What he failed to notice was a second tendril that went to the side to hit him in the back. When he was hit, he flew towards Nemuri, who ripped a bit of her costume to hit him with some of her somnambulist gas. This worked, but he didn't breath enough to fall asleep, only enough to slow down his reaction speed. This worked in the couple's favor, and Izuku was able to venomize Nemuri once again to slam Nighteye into the ground. This didn't knock him out, but he yielded since the only way to win was to look at Nemuri's future, but he couldn't do that until his hour of Venom Knight's future wore off. In the end, he allowed Shinso, Izuku, and Nemuri to be part of his agency. The little girl. Nemuri, Izuku, and Shinso were called to Nighteye's agency for the first time a week after they had been accepted. Once they got there, they were informed of the investigation Nighteye was performing on the Shie Hassaikai, and to look out for their leader, Overhaul. They were split into pairs to patrol. Since they were technically 2 heroes, Nighteye set Nemuri and Izuku by themselves. They were tasked with patrolling from the rooftops since there had been an increase in drug deals recently. It had been around 4 hours, and while they were able to stop a few crimes, not many criminals were out, almost as if something stronger was scaring them into hiding. They caught sight of Togata and Shinso, or as they were called during hero work, Lemillion and Leader. Though when they got a closer look, something seemed off. They looked distraught and frustrated. Lemillion ended a phone call, and then Nemuri got a call from Nighteye tell her and Izuku to meet up at the agency. When they got there, Togata and Shinso looked as if they were more upset than earlier. They all met in Nighteye's office, where he started to describe what happened with the other 2 sidekicks in the room. Sir, during their patrol, Lemillion and Leader came into contact with Overhaul. As Nemuri grew a shocked expression, they nodded to confirm Nighteye's claim. Sir, just moments before that, a small 6, maybe 7-year-old girl ran into Leader's leg and held on tight. According to him, she had white hair, red eyes, and her arms and legs were covered in bandages. She begged him not to let go, and that's when Overhaul appeared, claiming she was his daughter, but his appearance scared her more. Eventually, he got Eri to let go of Leader and go with him. Nemuri and Izuku were about to scold Shinso for letting her go, but when they saw that he was clearly already beating himself up about it, they let it go. Sir, now if there aren't any questions, I'll be putting out a team-up request into the system and hold a meeting with those who accept. You are all relieved for the rest of the day. The 4 work-study students went back to their dorms at UA. Before Shinso went up to his room, Nemuri and Izuku attempted to cheer him up, but they couldn't tell if it worked. Later that night, Nemuri awoke to a strange feeling. She could feel Izuku squirming, clearly upset or distracted by something. Nemuri, what's got you all riled up, Izuku? He stopped moving, realizing he was what woke her up. Izuku, oh, I'm sorry, Nemuri, it's nothing. Nemuri, you know you're horrible at lying, right? Izuku, knowing he was caught, gives in. Izuku, it's just this weird pain I've been feeling. It's no debilitating or anything, but it feels like it's coming from inside me. Nemuri, that's weird even for you. Is the pain constant? Izuku, no, it comes and goes. Sometimes it's more and others it's less. Nemuri, well, you have classes I have to get up for, so try not to move too much, Izu. She hoped the sudden new nickname would get him flustered. Which it did, but she didn't expect his response. He manifested just to say one sentence. Izuku, okay then, sweet dreams, Nemi. He then kissed her and retracted himself, and they both fell asleep, content with their nicknames. Planning the raid. It was 5 days after the run-in with Overhaul. Throughout the week, the students of 1A with work studies had seemingly gotten better out of nowhere. But one in particular had been working himself to the bone. At the end of each heroics class, Shinso could be seen going to the on-campus gym to work out. Only Nemuri and Izuku really knew why, but no matter what they did, he wouldn't stop, so they decided to let him go until the inevitable raid. It was a Tuesday morning when most of the 1A work-study students were called in, and all going to the same place. Once they all got the Nighteye's agency, they saw the big 3 waiting for them. They waved and greeted each other, but then had to go inside. They were instructed to go to the largest conference room Nighteye had available. They walked in and sat next to their work-study heroes. Well, since Nighteye was heading the meeting, Togata, Shinso, and Nemuri just sat in an open space next to Ryukyu's agency. Other than the work-study agencies, there were many others, even some solo pros who didn't found agencies were there as well. What surprised Izuku and Nemuri was that many of the pros then never really left the city they worked in. Nighteye started the meeting by explaining to all the heroes why they were investigating the Shie Hassaikai. A few heroes were confused, as they were essentially investigating on a hunch. To ease the confusion, Nighteye continued to explain that the SH were involved with the ever-growing drug trade. He had also explained he put in the request in the hero network towards the specific heroes at the meeting because they would know their areas better. One hero, however, decided it was time to voice his opinion. Rock. Okay, I can see how this investigation is important and all, but why are kids here? And I know that empty seat next to Midnight is meant for someone. Where are they? Nighteye. To answer your first question, they are here because they're work-study students and are to be treated as an agency's sidekicks. Now Midnight would be so kind as to inform Rock on the situation on the empty chair? The whole room then turned their heads toward Nemuri, awaiting an explanation. Nemuri. Sure. Besides, he loves being introduced like this. Midoriya, calm on out. Most heroes in the room watched with interest as the green-haired boy's head materialized from the pro's shoulder. Izuku. Hey everyone, I'm the one that seats for, but as you can see, I don't really need it. I'm Izuku Midoriya, and my hero name is Venom. Nighteye. Along with the fact that they're essentially sidekicks, the students in my agency and Fat Gums have had run-ins with either the SH themselves or criminals using drugs given to them by the SH. As the meeting went on, it was revealed that Amajiki was hit with a temporary quirk erasing bullet, and another was taken from the villain to reveal it was filled with human blood. Nighteye then went on to explain the little girl, now confirmed as 6-year-old Eri, who was given to her grandfather a year prior. When the room put 2 and 2 together, most of the heroes erupted into yelling at Shinso about letting her go. That's when the whole room shook and an unnatural shriek was heard. The whole room turned to see Venom Knight, on top of the table. Venom Knight yelling, "That is enough! Do any of you know how he's felt for the past 5 days? Nothing but guilt has filled his mind. We've had to drag him back to his dorm room because to train too much to get his mind off of the situation. He did what he thought was best at the time, and we will stand with him and his decision." Venom Knight then sat down but didn't devenomize, just in case they needed to yell at the heroes again. The rest of the room was speechless. Even the ones who expected Venom Knight to make an appearance during the meeting didn't think it would be to defend Shinso from the rest of the heroes there. Fat Gum was able to recover when he realized that the chair wasn't big enough to handle the new size of Venom Knight, and his stifled laughter was heard throughout the room. A quick glare shut him up though. Nighteye was the second to recover, and he quickly resumed the meeting and had the heroes investigate SH property in the cities they work in. The UA students went back to their dorms, and Venom Knight still didn't transform back to Nemuri. Most just assumed the two of them were still upset over the meeting. But what they didn't know was that Nemuri just didn't want Izuku to retract. Nemuri, why? It's because it feels like one giant hug. Am I not allowed to be hugged by my boyfriend? Izuku, who couldn't argue with her logic, no matter how hard he wanted to, relented. The reason he wanted to was because he had to cover her as tight as possible. This wasn't a problem in a fight, since he could just focus on that, but now he had nothing else to focus on. Nemuri of course knew this. Her hug reasoning was true, but she also just really wanted to get him flustered and embarrassed. It worked, as her plans usually did when it came to Izuku. But what she didn't expect was for him to squeeze tighter. She suspected this might be his usual attempt to get back at her, so she decided to tease him. Nemuri, oh? Wanted to feel more of me, Izu? Izuku, WW what? No, I just figured you might like a tighter hug, Nemi. She should have expected his innocent reasoning, but every time he said something that innocent, it just made her like him more. Nemuri, okay then. How about I give you a little surprise later for being so giving? Izuku couldn't talk to her for fear his voice would betray him, so he just agreed by nodding Venom Knight's head. Neither of them would get much sleep that night, or get to class on time either. The raid. It was barely 5 in the morning, 2 days after the meeting, when Nemuri, Izuku, Shinso, Uraraka, Ajiri, and the Big Three were called in to help in the raid. They all met up with the police at a local hero agency near the SH estate. They were simply awaiting the delivery of the search warrant before starting the raid. Once it had arrived, the heroes and police were given a quick briefing on the raid before they left to the estate. When they got there, it was still only 7 o'clock in the morning. Nemuri and Izuku were busy memorizing the quirks and appearances of known members of the Shie Hassaikai's 8 bullets. Their attention quickly shifted when a gigantic man, who most already guessed had the vitality absorption ability, busted through the front gate. He was quickly restrained by Ryukyu, who then told everyone else to head inside and that her agency would handle him. Once inside, Nighteye quickly led everyone towards the secret entrance. He opened it, but there were enemies on the other side, which were quickly handled by Centipeder and Bubble Girl. By this time, the only ones who made it to the basement were half of Nighteye's agency, Fat Gum's agency, Rock Lock, Eraserhead, and a small group of officers. They were running on the path Nighteye knew when all of a sudden Izuku pulled Nemuri back and a wall suddenly appeared. Nemuri, thanks for the save. Izuku accepted her thanks as they watched leader and Red Riot break through the relatively thin wall. When they did that, all hell broke loose. The walls and floor started waving around, and a pillar hit Fat and Red Riot into a hole in the wall, and Sun Eater fell into a newly opened hole, both of which closed too fast for anyone to assist. The heroes merely had to trust their comrades could fight whatever was waiting for them. The remaining group moved on, and Lemillion went ahead of the others, while the main group was left with Shinso as their only heavy hitter until Izuku and Nemuri decided it was time for Venom Night. Wall upon wall was put in front of them, and wall after wall was smashed. Thankfully, Izuku spotted Mimic's eye as he was watching them and broke the wall so Eraserhead could see him. This stopped the shifting and allowed them to keep moving. They hadn't seen Lemillion for the last 5 minutes and were starting to worry. They reached a dead end, but Shinso broke the wall to reveal Lemillion, now freshly quirkless, still attempting to fight Overhaul, while Eri was safe near a wall. Nighteye and Leader went to help Lemillion, while Nemuri helped Eri. Nemuri and Eri were almost back through the hole when Izuku barely reacted in time to pull them both out of the way of a spike, though it still managed to graze Nemuri. A small cut formed on her cheek which Izuku healed, but not before a small purplish drop of blood hit the floor, seemingly unnoticed by everyone, except Eri. After pulling them aside, Izuku immediately venomized Nemuri. Venom Knight. Listen to us, Eri. You need to keep moving. Go find the funny-looking man with the scarf. He'll keep you safe, okay? Eri merely nodded. Another pillar was sent their way but was locked in place by Rock Lock. Rock, trust us. We'll bring him down. Deep down, Eri felt safe behind the protection of the technically 6 heroes but followed their orders anyway, but not before noticing the mysterious purple drop was gone. She felt something squirm inside her, but she brushed it off as hunger. She then ran off to find the funny scarf man. Venom Knight grew 8 tendrils and charged toward Overhaul, who had seemed to combine his body with that of a subordinates and was currently beating the heroes already fighting him. 3 tendrils were sent to retrieve the injured heroes while the rest started to emit somnambulist and went to hit Overhaul. Just before they reached their targets, Nighteye was struck by a spike in his stomach. Venom Knight quickly went to break the top of the spike off so it could stay in, and he wouldn't bleed out. At this point, Overhaul had gotten hit by the somnambulist tendrils and was losing focus. It wasn't for long, but it was long enough for Venom Knight to get the others out of the way. Venom Knight. This ends here, Chisaki. Overhaul. I gave up that name. I am Overhaul, and I will cure this diseased society. They then immediately went to fighting after their exchange. Venom Knight breaking spikes sent their way and counter-attacking, and Overhaul clearly going on the defensive because of Venom Knight's speed. He was also breathing into much somnambulist gas. The only way out of this was something he wasn't even sure he could do. He aimed his larger pair of arms and shot flames into Venom Knight, and because of the intensity of the heat and how suddenly it appeared, Izuku was launched backwards, leaving Nemuri unprotected. He couldn't do anything but listen as she screamed. His body refused to take him further, no matter how hard he tried. He rushed to her when the flames died down. Leader had gotten back up and was engaging Overhaul once more. Izuku rolled and crawled as fast as he could. If he had an actual face, it would be covered in tears. He rebounded as fast as he could. The damage was insane, but he could heal it. He didn't know what this kind of damage could do to someone if not treated. They could die, she could die. But what he feared would happen did. He was too tired, the fire and forced expulsion exhausted him, and he felt himself start to slip out of consciousness before he could start the healing process. Izuku, no, not now. Please NOT now. Revealing recovery. The raid was finished, the day was won, but not everyone got out unscathed. Nighteye's stomach was completely decimated, Red Riot and Sun Eater had many broken bones, but most importantly, to Izuku at least, Nemuri was severely burned, and due to his inability to heal her immediately, she was in a coma for a while. She didn't blame Izuku, not even a little. She knew he had never faced flames that hot before. Izuku isolated himself, even within Nemuri's mind. He knew it wasn't his fault, but he couldn't stop blaming himself. Maybe if he had just tried to hold on a little harder, maybe if he had spared just one tendril as a getaway. He just stopped talking after a while too. Nemuri could still feel him, but he was distant. One night she figured she had to do something. When he closed himself off, he had also stopped paying attention to their surroundings. So Nemuri had Present Mike force him out. He didn't go loud enough to fling him across the room, but just loud enough to force him out. When he fell out, he just didn't move. Nemuri, Izuku Midoriya. When he heard the stern voice of Nemuri, he almost jumped. As he turned to face her, she started talking. Nemuri. Look, Izu. I know how you feel. Someone who was in your reach got hurt really bad, and you couldn't do anything but watch. Every hero has been there. Hell, even I closed myself off at 1.2. But you need to realize that there was nothing you could have done, no amount of planning or training that could have stopped me from getting hurt. It was your weakness, fire, one of two things you absolutely cannot fight against. When it was turned on us, there was no way we were getting out unscathed. I know what you need to hear, Izu. I forgive you, and I always will, because I love you. Nemuri then stuck her hand out, and Izuku eagerly bonded back with her. Izuku, thank you, Nemi. Sorry for cutting myself off. Nemuri. No problem, Izu. And I know just the way for you to make up for it tonight. She giggled as she ended the sentence. It was a giggle that only Izuku knew the meaning of. You're not sleeping tonight. All of a sudden clapping was heard near the door of the training room they were in. Not congratulatory, but seemingly menacing, because most people who hear that clap never make it out without at least one threat to their career. Standing in the doorway, at approximately 85 centimeters, or 2 feet 9.5 inches, is the white-furred bear mouse cat thing that is Principal Nezu. Nezu. Wow. That was quite the spectacle, Midnight. At least I hope it was just that, a spectacle, a show. Or was it? His sudden appearance caused the other three to gulp, while Izuku made the sound in Nemuri's head, but we'll include him anyway. Nemuri was terrified. If Nezu doesn't like what he sees, then not only is her teaching career put the window, she could also say goodbye to her hero license forever. Izuku could feel her fear and tried to calm her down, which worked for about a second before her fear skyrocketed and leaked over to him. Nezu then burst out laughing like their absolute terror was the funniest shit he'd ever seen, which then caused the group's fear to turn into confusion. When he calmed himself, Nezu spoke up once again. Nezu, wiping tears from eyes. Oh, I've needed that for a long while. Don't worry, I won't do anything. In fact, I knew the whole time something like this would happen. What else could you realistically think would happen when you stick a 16-year-old symbiote with a lonely 30-year-old woman? They were about to argue with him but realized just how futile that would be. Nezu. You're free to go, but I'd suggest getting back to your dorms before 1A finishes watching the security footage from this room that I'm about to play on their common space television. Nemuri and Izuku then rushed back to the dorms to find the footage just ending and 1A rushing to the training room to look for them. They were able to hide around the corner of the building and sneak in once everyone had left. Class 1A was waiting for them in the morning. Eventually they went to check their room, which they had forgotten to lock. When 1A saw inside the room, all they saw was Nemuri asleep under covers. They all thought the same thing. 1A, why are they still asleep at 1 in the afternoon? 2 children. Since their relationship was now known by all of Class 1A, Nemuri and Izuku could now be together, and just be a couple without needing to hide. Right now Izuku's head was leaning on Nemuri's neck, as the only non-venomized part of her was her head. They were just sitting on the couch watching TV and enjoying each other's company. The first hour after they woke up was full of students demanding explanations. The girls even forgot Izuku was within Nemuri and dragged her off to answer more personal questions. It wasn't until Nemuri started laughing her ass off in the middle of the interrogation that the girls realized they had forgotten about Izuku. They then panicked and shoved Nemuri out of the dorm room they were in. The second hour was full of stares, mostly from students who couldn't comprehend what had happened, and then a stare full of perverted hate and curiosity from Mineta, who was promptly hung upside down as soon as Zero caught on to his intentions. Aizawa had given the students the day off to try to come up with an event for the upcoming cultural festival. Izuku had to retract to preserve energy, but to Nemuri's personal delight, he fully venomized her so she could keep him around her. Nemuri, how do you know I wanted this? Izuku, I can hear your thoughts, remember? I also figured you'd want more time than I could spend manifested. The class then watched as Venom Knight laid out on the couch, which was too small for them as their legs slightly dangled off the side. That was when Aizawa walked in to check on the progress of the students' brainstorming. What he didn't expect was a passed-out Venom Knight slowly crushing the couch they were on. He then sighed as he realized that the replacement couch would need a replacement. The first couch, which originally would have been big enough for 2 Venom Knights, had been crushed when the students wanted to see just how much weight Shinso could hold with one arm. The pile of junk they found had admittedly gotten too large, and when it toppled, it crushed the couch with no mercy. They had to pull out an extra they had until the new one got delivered. That was a week and a half ago, and the couch was stuck in California somewhere, so the smaller couch was all they had left. Aizawa, however, knew better than try to wake them up, so he just had Hagakure and Kirishima go steal another from the 1B dorms. He knew Vlad would have his head for it, but that would only happen once 1B broke their couch, which would happen eventually, but only at a time when neither Kendo nor Shiozaki were in the dorms. His thinking was then interrupted by a call from the hospital. He knew the only reason they would be calling would be to talk about Eri and her condition, so he picked up. Aizawa. Hello? Receptionist. Eraserhead. Hi. Eri has recently been asking about a funny-looking woman with green goop. Would you know anything about this? Eraserhead. Yes, I do, and I can bring them today. Receptionist. Perfect. We'll be ready for your arrival. The receptionist then hung up. Aizawa now had to wake Venom Knight up. He groaned as he went over and shoved them off the couch, and they woke up when they hit the floor. Venom Knight. Aizawa, explain yourself. Now. Aizawa. I apologize, but Eri's been asking for you. Devenomize so we can get going. Venom Knight acknowledged the reason and transformed back into Nemuri. Aizawa then led her to his car and started the drive to the hospital. Time skipped 2 hours. They had arrived at the hospital. They went inside and the receptionist pointed them in the right direction. Once they got there, they saw Eri in her bed, and when she saw them she brightened and smiled. Eri, almost jumping out of bed, goo lady. Izuku then manifested. Izuku. Actually, I'm the goo. She has a completely different quirk. What surprised everyone in the room was that she wasn't surprised, almost as if she knew already. Izuku. Well, that's weird, most people are surprised. Then something shocking happened. A purple goo started to cover Eri's shoulder. The head of a little girl around the same age of Eri appeared. She looked very similar to Izuku. She had his freckles and overall head shape. She also had his hair, but its color reminded everyone in the room of a certain, older symbiote host. Hello, father, mother. The couple froze. Some say the eyes are a window into the mind. If that was true and you looked into their yes, you'd see gears stop and slowly start moving again. They then fainted. Are they dead? The smaller symbiote sounded so innocent and worried for its parents. After a bit they got up and started asking questions like when did you bond with Eri and how were you born? At first all I remember is darkness, and when I moved whatever I was in squirmed as if in pain. Izuku and Nemuri looked at each other in sudden understanding. She then continued. Then one day I felt an opening so I went through it. Eri was the only one who noticed me so I went to her and bonded with her. The couple realized it was when Nemuri got cut during the raid. Izuku then realized something. Izuku, do you have a name? If not, we can name you since you're, basically our daughter. The young symbiote brightened up at the mention of her getting a name. Izuku took this as a yes he can. He then looked at Nemuri who just nodded. Izuku, well then. I harbi name you Izuku Midoriya, in memory of my mother. The newly named Izuku was ecstatic at her new name, and Eri seemed incredibly happy for her body mate. Izuku. Thank you, father. Izuku. Anything for you. To Aizawa. Do you think they'll be able to leave the hospital for the cultural festival? Aizawa. Actually, Eri can be discharged in a couple days. The doctors can document Izuku in just a few hours. Izuku. Great. They'll have to stay together since Izuku will need a host. Please tell the doctors they need extra food. Aizawa nodded. The group said their goodbyes to the two girls and left. Izuku and Nemuri were closer than ever now that they knew of Inko. Cultural Festival. It had been 2 weeks since the cultural festival was announced. 1A had decided to do a concert and had split into 3 teams: band, dance, and special effects. Nemuri and Izuku were tasked with using tendrils to hold Oyama up so he could act as a disco ball using his lasers. Eri and Inko had been released and moved into the dorms during the first week of preparation for the festival. Since Nemuri and Izuku were the only other symbiote host duo on campus, Eri and Inko were moved into a dorm room near the couples. It had eventually gotten out that Inko was, in essence, Izuku's and Nemuri's daughter, which caused wide confusion among the class until it was explained how she had come to be. The week after had consisted of Eri and Inko adapting to dorm life and getting taught elementary education by Ectoplasm and Hound Dog. Izuku and Nemuri also started to teach them how to work together and be as symbiotic as possible. The whole school was excited for the festival. Since the sports festival is for the hero course, the cultural festival was for the rest of the students. Parents had even come to help prepare. It was a fairly common occurrence for Class 1A to see the parents of their classmates, though Izuku had hid for a while since he had gotten tired of having to explain his quirk to people. Though there was one pair who had caught him, and they recognized him. Nemuri and Izuku were relaxing in the common space as they usually did when they were done practicing, when Bakugo walked in, followed by his parents. Izuku was too comfortable to hide, so he mentally prepared to explain himself, when he heard something he didn't expect from Bakugo's mom. Mitsuki. Izuku? This made everyone freeze. Izuku then looked at her. She looked vaguely familiar. Izuku. I'm sorry, but do I know you? You clearly know me, but I don't remember you. The woman looked saddened but held a look of understanding too. She moved closer and got on her knees to be face to face with him on the couch. Mitsuki. Of course you wouldn't. You were so young when Hisashi left, and you and Inko had to move. You didn't look like this yet, but there's no way I could ever forget that adorable, freckled face of yours. I'm Mitsuki Bakugo. I was your mother's best friend, before the attack. She looked as if she was going to cry. Mitsuki, with tears flowing down her face. I'm so sorry, I should have been there. I should have looked for you better. Izuku used a tendril to gently wipe her tears. Izuku. It's alright. Truth be told, I wouldn't trade the life I'm living right now for anything. But to explain that, we should find somewhere a bit more private to talk. Mitsuki nodded and got up. Nemuri then stood and led Mitsuki and Masaru towards her and Izuku's room. Once they were there, the Bakugo family sat around a table Nemuri had in the room and listened as Izuku explained his life after the death of his mother, how he met Nemuri and got into Yue, and their relationship. He also called Eri and Inko in to show them to Bakugo's parents. Mitsuki. Wow. I still wish I could have helped, but I'm happy for you, Izuku. She still had some tears threatening to fall, but she seemed like she felt better than she did earlier. Her and Masaru then got up to leave, and Izuku and Nemuri told them to visit anytime they wanted. Izuku was happy to reunite with a friend of his mom's. Time skipped to the festival. It was finally the day of the festival. Nemuri and Izuku were already sitting in the rafters of Gym Gamma and were waiting for Shinso before the concert started. Shinso needed more coffee, so he went out to a convenience store to get more, and now he was running late. He had 10 minutes to get back on time before the concert. With just 3 minutes left, he appeared, a little dirty and roughed up, but not enough to be noticeable from the floor. He quickly got his band shirt on and got in his place to start dancing. A minute into the song, Oyama appeared in his hero costume, which was their key to pull him up. He was lifted and started spinning and shooting his laser from all over his suit. Nemuri then started to run back and forth along the rafters to move him. The added sparkles from the ice particles in the air after the rest of the special effects were deployed made his lasers even more spectacular. The concert was a huge hit. All the students who attended loved it, even those who went just to insult 1A left, only had good things to say. The class was able to enjoy the rest of the cultural festival. Izuku and Nemuri even made candy apples for Eri and Inko to enjoy. The Bakugos came by to socialize with other parents, make up for lost time with Izuku, and spend time with Eri and Inko. All the guests went home after having dinner with the class. The class all went up to their rooms, exhausted after the festival. Nemuri wanted to be venomized, but they both fell asleep before Izuku could undo the transformation. A new bed would have to be ordered in the morning. You traitor. It was Nemuri and Izuku's turn to go put and buy groceries for the class dorms. They also brought Eri and Inko to get Eri new clothes, and some toys to keep the two occupied back at the dorms. They went to the mall first to get Eri and Inko's things. Because of the fact that Inko had to stay hidden so people couldn't make the connection between Izuku, Nemuri, and her based on their appearances, Eri had to point out the things Inko wanted. After that they went to a grocery store to get what the class needed. They didn't expect what they saw when they got back though. UA. Known for its security measures and how it was nearly impossible to get in without specific abilities, and it was locked down. The Nemuri was driving back to UA when she saw that it was in lockdown. She tried to call Nezu but he wasn't answering his phone, no one was. Then she realized the type of lockdown the school was in was preventing any in or outgoing communications. Whatever was going on had to be dealt with by the staff and students already inside. 1A dorms just after they left. Shinso had just woken up and came downstairs to get some lunch. The rest of 1A were all downstairs, enjoying their day off. To Shinso's surprise 1B was there, and Monoma. Actually what truly surprised him was that Shiozaki wasn't there. Once he realized that he went around asking why she wasn't there. Kendo. She said she wasn't feeling well and stayed in her room. Tetsu. Really? She told me she needed to give Nezu some papers. Monoma. What? No, she's off to visit family in the area. This confused everyone. Why would she have so many excuses? Where was she? What was she doing? After a few minutes of debating they all came to a decision. Call Nezu, and asked him to find her. Kendo was the one to call the rodent principal. He picked up on the first ring. Nezu. Yes, Ms. Kendo? I'm terribly busy at the moment, so this better be important. Kendo. Nezu, sir. Shiozaki is missing. She gave everyone in 1B a different excuse. We were wondering if you could find her. She waited for a response from the rat for a few minutes. She almost thought that he hung up on her. Nezu. Ms. Kendo, all will be explained in time. The business I need to attend to actually pertains to Ms. Shiozaki, so please don't leave wherever you are. In background. Level 3 lockdown ASAP. Back to Kendo. Remember, stay where you are. Hangs up. Kendo then explained what happened to the two classes in the room. They were all confused what a Level 3 lockdown was, but they quickly figured that out when the lights dimmed and the doors and windows became covered in metal shutters. It had been hours since the lockdown was initiated and both classes were beginning to worry, not just for Shiozaki, but for their teachers and fellow students. Then just as they were truly starting to calm down, they heard something on the other side of the sealed doors and windows. It sounded like something, or someone, was scratching at the metal. They all looked on in, first confusion then fear, as vines in all sizes started to pierce and tear through the metal. The vines removed the metal to reveal Shiozaki, in her hero costume, with her vines all over the campus, as she walked inside. Shiozaki. I apologize for tricking you, my friends, and I hope you'll forgive me when God cleanses this society, though I presume you'd rather me call him, all for one. This answered the class' unspoken question, why? Her religious beliefs must have brought her to the conclusion that the only being that could be as strong as AFO would be God. But that didn't mean they weren't upset, far from it, and Kendo, who would usually be calm and collected, was pissed. Kendo. What the hell do you mean? Does being a hero mean that little? Does our friendship mean that little to you? Shiozaki grew a pained face when she realized that her friends would not come with her. Shiozaki. No, they do not. In fact, they mean the world to me. But what kind of person would I be if I defied God? Kendo. You'd be a great hero, our friend, an inspiration to many, and so much more. Please turn yourself in and repent, so we can all be heroes together again. Shiozaki then looked down in grief, and when she looked back up she had tears in her eyes. Shiozaki. If I could I would, but I owe him my life. I can't just forget that. I am truly sorry, Itsuka. The classes were stunned. That was the first time Shiozaki had used anyone's first name. Even when they told her to call the by theirs, she never did. They all realized just how painful leaving them was to her. Once she was gone, the lockdown was lifted, and in mere seconds, Venom Knight appeared at the doors of the building carrying bags and their tendrils with Eri on their back. Venom Knight. What happened here? Suddenly the announcement system turned on and Nezu ordered everyone to go to their dorms. He also explained the situation and told everyone that Hound Dog would be available for counseling. Kurojire's capture. It had been a month since Shiozaki's reveal as the UA traitor. UA was facing the biggest backlash they'd ever had because they had a traitor. Parents were threatening to pull their kids from the school and others wanted to sue them. Classes who had heard what happened at the 1A dorms weren't exactly worried for them, but mildly concerned since they were the last line of defense, and the traitor was among them. The two hero courses were still very upset that their friend was the traitor, but unlike before, they were also very determined to get her back and save her from AFO's clutches. It was a slow day. Classes seemed to move at a slug's pace, and both Nemuri and Izuku almost fell asleep in their desk. Even the heroics class was dull to them. Then, when Nemuri was walking back to the dorms and talking to Izuku, Aizawa came over to request their help in the mission. What it was, he didn't tell them, but it sounded urgent, so Nemuri went with him. After a 2-hour train ride, and a few miles of walking, they made it to a forest. Alongside them were Gran Torino and Detective Tsukachi. That's when they were told they were going to capture Kurojire, the League of Villains' one form of transportation. It seemed that cameras in the forest had recorded him looking for something. Nemuri. Well, what are we waiting for? Let's go already. They all nodded in agreement, and they all charged in. Izuku had venomized Nemuri and Venom Knight was using their tendrils to swing from tree to tree. Eventually they caught sight of the misty villain and started to fall towards him. Instead, a warp gate was opened right where they would have landed. Venom Knight used a tendril to move to the side before they could fall in. Venom Knight. This trickery won't save you, Kurojire. 6 tendrils, all leaking somnambulist, were sent towards Kurojire. He then opened warp gates for all of them and sent them right back at Venom Knight. They were able to retract the tendrils before they got hit, but that still left Kurojire unscathed. Kurojire. Well, at the moment, it seems like it will, though I am surprised. I have watched you fight enemies who would be too much for me, so I ask, why are you holding back? Perhaps you don't want to harm the environment? Or maybe you don't. He was cut off by Gran Torino kicking him in the face and Eraserhead binding him. Kurojire. Rude. But now I know. You didn't want to harm your nearby allies. Why isn't my gate working? He looked up to see Eraserhead, eyes glowing red behind his goggles. Kurojire. Oh, you brought him with you. How surprisingly intelligent of you heroes. Tsukachi then placed Quirk suppressing cuffs on him, which to the surprise of many, didn't turn off his mist. Later, they were on the train heading back to the dorms. Aizawa. Thank you for coming. You didn't do much, but we couldn't have gotten him without your distraction. Now, why are you still venomized? Venom Knight. Because we like it like this, and because we didn't get to do anything. We were practically bait. Aizawa. I'm sorry, okay? Is that what you wanted to hear? Venom Knight grunted in agreement but continued to talk. Venom Knight. As long as next time we get to do more than just distract, you're forgiven, Shota. Aizawa. Sure, whatever you want, just please don't break the new couch that just came in, please. Venom Knight. No promises. Aizawa sighed, already preparing to buy another couch. When they got back to the dorms, Venom Knight lay down on the couch, which was bigger than the first one to compensate for them, and fell asleep watching the TV. Eventually Eri came down and laid down next to them. Inko even partially venomized Eri to be a part of the sleeping party. Shirakumo's return. Nemuri and Izuku were cooking breakfast together 3 days after Kurojire was captured and taken in by the police. With what they had gathered, he was a highly advanced Nomu which was capable of self-thought and reasoning. The only other Nomu that was anywhere near that was the one Endeavor and Hawks had recently beat, but that one was still simple-minded, unlike Kurojire. After breakfast, Aizawa walked in with a grim face and practically dragged Nemuri out of the dorm building into his car, where he then started to drive. Nemuri. Okay, Shota. Where are we going? Why'd you pull me out of the dorms? Aizawa. It's because of whose body was used to make Kurogiri. Nemuri looked confused. Who could be dead, that both her and Aizawa knew, who could bring about such a grave and saddened expression on Aizawa's face? Then it clicked. Nemuri. Are you sure? Where's Hisashi? Aizawa. I'm positive. His DNA was detected to be what mostly made up Kurogiri. Hisashi is already at Tartarus waiting for us. Nemuri remained quiet for the rest of the trip, though she was quickly telling Izuku what was going on and why the person who made up Kurogiri was important. They made it to Tartarus in under an hour. When they got out of the car, they were quickly led to Kurogiri's interrogation room. Hisashi, or President Mike, was already there, looking more stressed than anyone had ever seen him. Nemuri and Aizawa took the remaining seats inside the room. The guards informed them of what they were hoping they could get out of him. The three in the room had their own personal mission. Bring back Oboro Shirakumo. And so it started. At first they were recounting their days together in school, to which Kurogiri simply scoffed at. Then they started talking about their dream to open a hero agency together, which caused Kurogiri's miss to falter, just a little. After a while of talking about their past, Aizawa started to get emotional. He took off his goggles and started talking about how great of a person Shirakumo was. This caused the mist to part down the middle of Kurogiri's face, revealing the face of their lost friend. He started to answer the questions of the guards in the other room. At the sight of his face, Hisashi lost his hold on his emotions and started to tearfully beg for his friend back, which caused the mist to split down to his waist. Nemuri couldn't take any more and started to cry and talk to him about when she confided in him about her insecurities about being the R-rated hero. This was the last straw. Kurogiri's mist completely dissipated and Oboro Shirakumo was the only being left in the body. He fell unconscious from the strain of fighting off Kurogiri's influence on his psyche. Guards, understanding what had just happened, rushed into his side of the room and escorted him to a secure medical room. The three heroes were allowed to go to his room. On the way there, it quickly became evident that Nemuri wasn't paying attention as she subconsciously cried and was consoled by Izuku. A smile grew on Aizawa's face once he realized just how good they were for each other. When they reached Shirakumo's room, they each took a seat. Nemuri promptly fell asleep from the mental exhaustion. Approximately 8 hours later, Shirakumo had finally woken up from his mini coma. When he sat up, he looked around to find two of his friends in chairs, asleep, and one very big, slime-covered woman asleep on the ground, surrounded by chair parts. Confused, he woke up who he assumed would be the calmest of his friends, Aizawa. Shirakumo. Hey! Shota, who's that? Aizawa, suppressing his excitement, woke up and started to speak. Aizawa. Oh, that's Venom Knight. It's a story that I currently don't want to tell. Aizawa, unable to hold himself back any longer, tackled the ex-Nomu back onto the bed with a very unexpected hug. The yelp of surprise woke up both Yamada PM and Venom Knight, both of whom did the same thing, except Venom Knight's impact broke the hospital bed he was in. Once they all got off and apologized, Venom Knight devenomized to reveal Nemuri, which just further confused Shirakumo, but it then turned to worry. Shirakumo. Nemuri? Did AFO get to you too? The three heroes then chuckled at his worried confusion. Izuku then manifested on her shoulder and explained why he was there. Shirakumo. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Though from the sound of your guys' voices, I'd say there's something you're not telling me. The couple looked worried. Shirakumo was a very important friend to Nemuri, and neither her nor Izuku wanted to do anything to put a rift between her and Shirakumo. But then they steeled their nerves and told him the truth, but in a little more theatrical way to cushion the imaginary blow their relationship could hit the man with. Nemuri. I am Midnight. Izuku. I am Venom. They then venomized. Venom Knight. We are Venom Knight. They stood up. Venom Knight. And we are dating. Shirakumo then burst out laughing. He took a few minutes to compose himself. Shirakumo. Oh my god! You didn't need to be that dramatic to tell me what I already guessed. It's fine, I'm honestly happy for you too. He was then confused as to why they just sat down instead of devenomizing. Aizawa spoke up to answer his unspoken question. Aizawa. They like the feeling of being together like this. They also get very moody when something doesn't go the way they wanted it to. Venom Knight. We do not get moody, Shota. The three guys had a small laugh at their expense. But in the end, everyone was happy to have Shirakumo back. A week after his awakening, Shirakumo was officially recognized as alive by the government, was pardoned of Kurogiri's crimes, and given a pro-hero license. He was also hired by Nezu to be a hero training tutor. Joint combat training. It was an ordinary day. 1A woke up, ate breakfast, and got ready for classes. They all walked to their classroom and sat down to wait for Aizawa to come in and start the day. Once he came in, they could tell something special was going to happen when Shirakumo came through a warp gate and sitting on one of his clouds. Aizawa. As you all could probably guess, today will be a little different. All of your classes have been cancelled to make room for a joint training session with 1B. Shirakumo. And I'm here to stop any extra dangerous fights from seriously hurting any of you. All of the students looked excited as Aizawa pressed the button to release their costumes from the wall. Nemuri, who already had hers on, simply followed Aizawa and Shirakumo to the factory-like training ground they would be using. The two classes and Vlad got there shortly after they did, so the teachers started explaining the exercise. When that was done, the matches were revealed. It turned out that Nemuri and Izuku were alone in theirs, which made sense based on how unfair it was that they could participate anyway. But to make it even, they were put up against Rogers from 1B and another American exchange Gen Ed student named Tony Stark, who everyone agreed should have at least been in the support course. His quirk was much like Nezu's own. High specs made him significantly smarter, but since Stark already had an intelligent mind, he was ultimately smarter than Nezu, which allowed him to create the silver-colored suit he was wearing. And due to Shiozaki leaving, he had to be in 2 matches that day. Most matches went without a hitch. The only problem was that Shinso started spewing out dark tendrils from his wrist as he tried to capture Stark. Once that was taken care of, there were only 2 matches before Nemuri and Izuku's. During the last 2 matches, Stark could be seen by a small case, attaching new devices to his already very advanced armor. The people who were watching this couldn't make out what most of them were, but once he put what were obviously speakers of some kind on to his gauntlets, it was obvious what they all were for: to dominate Venom Knight in their upcoming fight. This caused Nemuri and Izuku some worry, as they remembered the last time they were separated in a fight. Nemuri was hurt badly. They put those fears aside, knowing Stark wouldn't go that far, but still secretly wished that he wouldn't use any fire. Once their match was up, both teams walked to different parts of the training ground. Then once they were ready, President Mike came on through the speakers. PM. Alright, let's do this. The creepy and slimy duo of Midnight and Venom, also known as Venom Knight versus the patriotically named Captain America and the metal newcomer Iron Man, let the match start. With that said, the duo venomized and leapt into the maze of pipes to begin their hunt. Cap started to walk through the factory-like maze while IM was flying above and scanning for any sign of Venom Knight. After a few minutes he caught sight of a tendril, and knowing it was most likely a trap, he told Cap where it was through their comms. Cap had found it, and started to follow it deeper. Before he got too deep he had IM follow him, so, if they did find Venom Knight, they could fight together. It didn't take long. They reached a big open room, and when they looked around, they saw at least 30 separate tendrils all going different directions. They also saw some weird green-looking spider silk on the ground, in the shape of a web. Before the trap could be sprung, IM used a laser to cut the web around where they were standing. After that, they heard an echoing cackling, but they couldn't see where Venom Knight's voice was coming from. Venom Knight. Well done, maybe you two are hero material after all. Cap then threw his shield in the direction he thought the voice was coming from, but all it did was bounce around and come back. Though now there was a small, green, string on its rim. Before he could realize what was going on, Cap was dragged into the darkness. All IM could hear were grunts and hissing, and then silence. After that a new sound was heard, metal rolling on concrete, as the shield slowly rolled into view, with Venom Knight right behind it. Venom Knight. 1 down, 1 to go. I am. Nice for you to finally join us. You know, for a hero, you're acting pretty damn evil. He then activated his boots and started flying around while firing repulsor blasts at the venomized giant. The beams had little effect, and while he was doing that, the many spread out tendrils all retracted. One hit him on its way back, which caused him to fall. He got back up, avoiding tendrils now coming from Venom Knight's back. They then charged at him and went to hit him in the chest. He moved just enough to cause them to miss, but one of his shoulder plates got knocked off. He boosted away and readied a small shoulder-mounted device, which was quickly discerned to be a miniature rocket launcher. He fired, and most were deflected by tendrils, but one made it through and launched them to the other side of the room. Thankfully they were concussive, not explosive, so no damage to their bond was created. He then readied the small sound cannons he attached to his gauntlets, and started to bombard them with sound, which started to slowly rip Izuku from Nemuri. Venom Knight screeched in pain from the separation, but then the sound stopped, allowing Venom Knight to pull themselves back together. A small curse could be heard from IM as his cannons couldn't maintain the frequency needed to fully separate them. He barely dodged a flying kick from the now very angry Venom Knight. Once he could, he flew into the air again and prepped his final weapon, a flamethrower attached to his other shoulder. He started to spew flames at the now scared Venom Knight, who was barely able to avoid the flames, but the heat had forced them to devenomize, leaving Nemuri to fight IM alone until he could recover. Hoping his suit wasn't airtight, she ripped the biggest part of her costume that she could and made the biggest, most dense cloud of somnambulist she could at the moment. It invaded his suit and caused him to fall asleep instantly. She also fell unconscious from the energy it took to keep Venom Knight from completely separating. When she woke up, she was in the infirmary. She could feel Izuku moving. She smiled knowing they were both okay. Aizawa came in and told her she won, and because of his performance, Stark was moved into 1B's empty seat. She then went back to the dorms. Her and Izuku fell asleep after a long day. New work study. Since Nighteye was severely injured during the raid, Nemuri and Izuku had to find a new agency to work study at. They were looking through the available agencies when one caught their attention. The agency of the hero group, the Wild Hussicats, had come up. They were back in action again, and Ragdoll was continuing her hero work, even with the absence of her search quirk. The fact that they were on the list was something the two were thankful for. Nemuri had wanted to check in after Kamino but never got the chance, and Izuku wanted to meet the team that helped train his classmates. They then decided that the WWP agency was their next destination. Once they picked up the work-study form for Izuku, and the agency transfer form for Nemuri, she dragged Aizawa to his car, and told him to drive to the agency. He was confused at first, but when he saw the papers she was holding he understood, and started the drive. Time skipped 2 hours. They had arrived at the agency, and because they called an hour into theme drive, Pixie Bob was waiting at the door. She looked confused when only 2 people got out of the car. PB. So, where's the work-study kitten you were bringing? Nemuri. All will be explained inside when we're all together. PB. Alright, as long as you stop being all cryptic, it doesn't suit you. They then proceeded to walk inside, and go into an office with 4 different colored desks, 1 for each Hussiecat. Pixie Bob then called the other 3 who then came in and take their seats. Mandalay motioned for Aizawa and Nemuri to sit on a couch in the middle of the room. Mandalay. We were told that there would be a student with you too, where are they? You know what happens, Nemuri calls Izuku out, confusion ensues. Izuku explains. Ragdoll. So you were transferred, while the rest of the class was here? Izuku nodded. Tiger. That's a lot to take in, but given everything that's happened, I don't think anyone here is that bothered. So why do you want to work here? Izuku. We want to work on our rescue skills, and since space is limited back at UA, we'd be able to stretch our legs a lot better here in a forest. Speaking of the forest, since you all work in different environments every day, it'll allows us to learn to adapt to our environment easier. We'd also be able to lessen the workload so you're all not as tired at the end of the day. The Hussicats nodded, walked over to one another, huddled, and talked. Once they were done they all went back to their seats. Mandalay. We've gone over your reasons, the pros of hiring you, as well as the cons, and we would like to say that you two start next week. They each stamped Izuku's work study form and signed Nemuri's transfer paper. They talked for a little bit before waving goodbye to the UA visitors. The week went by faster than expected. The couple were excited to start their new work study. They got up, Nemuri ate breakfast, and went to the agency. When they got there, they were greeted by Tiger, who gave Nemuri one of their cat ear-like headsets that lets them actively listen for radio broadcasts for lost civilians. Not long after, someone was stuck underneath a tree which had fallen onto their car. Izuku venomized Nemuri, and they quickly leapt into action. They were there in mere minutes and were able to get the tree off of the vehicle and create enough space for the person to crawl out. The rest of the day was roughly the same. Wait for a call, go take care of it. Though Venom Knight wasn't able to do much for some emergencies, like Pixie Bob had to take care of a mudslide which had trapped a couple of park ranger jeeps. Venom Knight had also been practicing with their webs and tendrils. They were even able to help a camper cut some firewood with a tendril and web it up so the camper could take it with them. They went back to the dorms that night, excited for the next time they were called in. Nemuri even gave Izuku a little reward for them doing so much that day. Association's opinion. Nemuri and Izuku were nearly about to fall asleep after prying a venomized area off of a wall. Her and Inko had been trying to venomize for the past week, and once they finally did, they got stuck on the wall in the common space. It wasn't that they couldn't let go, they were scared of how high they were. The newly dubbed Yuri, pronounced Eerie, had by now devenomized and they were asleep in their room. The next day was relatively normal. Everyone got up, went to class, and trained. It wasn't until the afternoon that something strange happened. The class turned on the TV and a breaking news broadcast came on. Reporter: It looks like Daika City has collapsed, or turned to dust, or something. We can't really tell what's going on through all the dust still in the air, but whatever, or whoever did this is very powerful because the Detonarat Company Tower is gone. This caused mass confusion throughout the country, except for the dorms of Class 1A. They knew the look of that dust, the pattern of those cracks in the ground, all too well. Tamura Shigaraki struck, no one knew why, but what they did know was that he had grown very powerful. Once they realized that, they called Aizawa and Nezu to tell them what they had deducted. Later a meeting was held with several agencies being in attendance. Nemuri was called by herself, but the WWP weren't, meaning that the heroes at the meeting would just have to accept that he was there. She called the WWP and told them they couldn't come in because of the meeting. Then they were off. There were many heroes there, some of which knew of Izuku and knew of his constant presence within Nemuri. Most, however, had no clue, and that included the Hero Association officials who were leading the meeting. They then started the meeting. Official 1. So most of you know why we're here, to talk about the recent attack and subsequent destruction of Daika City. The heroes nodded in recognition of the reason. Official 2. But we're also here to discuss a certain hero course student from UA, which is the main reason Midnight is also here. One Izuku Midoriya, Quirk, Symbiote. It gives him the body of a ball of goo, and he requires a host to survive. The only reason he isn't considered a parasite is because of the boost someone gets when he venomizes them. He can also asexually reproduce, which is evidenced by one Inko Midoriya, his daughter, who had separated from him and bonded to the small Eri during the SH raid. The room looked slightly confused, not at the quirk, they'd all seen weirder quirks, but at why he was a topic. The officials saw this, so the third and last one spoke up. Official 3. The reason we're discussing this student is because he's dangerous. We've seen what happens when he venomizes someone, namely Midnight. They become aggressive, and much more powerful than they are normally. If he were to turn to the other side, there's no telling what kind of chaos he could create. Most heroes were shocked that they would do this to a child, while the ones who had personally met him were outraged. Ryukyu and Rock Lock decided to speak up, trying their best not to yell. Ryukyu: I worked with him on the raid and I can tell you that he would never do anything like that. Rock: I fought by his and Midnight's side during the raid. If anything, he was one of the most heroic people there. He fought even as the flames overhaul were using ripped him from Midnight's body. These comments seemed to upset the officials, and the fact that the two heroes caused the rest of the room to turn against the idea of Izuku being dangerous. Then Nemuri spoke up. Nemuri, you clearly know nothing about him, because if you did, you'd know he's only had one host for the past few months, me. He can bond with anyone, but that does mean they'll be symbiotic. Me and him are, so he hasn't left. And yes, that means he's here right now, watching and listening to this meeting. The officials looked shocked, then angry. The heroes who defended Izuku now had smug looks on their faces. Izuku then manifested on Nemuri's shoulder. Izuku, nice to know how you feel. Thanks to you who defended me. Now, before you association guys get mad, what Kayama said is true, me and her are symbiotic, and we will not be separated. He then retracted back into her to prevent himself from yelling at the officials. Official 1. This is unacceptable, he wasn't requested, so he shouldn't be here. Ryukyu. If your first subject was how dangerous a child could be with their quirk, then this meeting wasn't worth coming to. She then got up and left the room, followed by Rocklock and Nemuri. Some others left within, but a few stayed behind for the rest of the meeting. Nemuri and Izuku got back to UA and complained to Nezu, who then assured them that he would deal with the association. They went back to the dorms mad and went to sleep later annoyed. UA raid. It had only been 3 days since the meeting, but Nezu could tell the association was up to something. He recently discovered that he no longer had access to parts of the database he did before, such as sections on provisional and pro-hero licenses. It was relatively easy to get back in, although he would have to make stronger firewalls once he was done. But every time he got in, someone kicked him back out. He got in contact with a source of his he had within the association, as he always assumed something like this might happen, and asked them if they knew what was going on. All the contact knew was that the meeting was the source of his problem and had stirred something inside the association. The contact was also able to get into the parts of the database Nezu couldn't, and as it turned out, the licenses for certain heroes had been removed, not revoked, but completely removed, as if they never had their licenses in the first place. This obviously didn't sit well with Nezu, so he asked about certain individual heroes, and it turned out the hunch he had was correct. The heroes known as Venom, Leader, Midnight, Ryukyu, Rocklock, Eraserhead, Present Mike, and Loud Cloud no longer had their licenses. Then something he never expected happened. The building shook, windows were broken, and UA was being invaded by the Hero Association. Just because he was small and furry didn't mean Nezu wasn't powerful. He had his hero license for a reason, as did every hero in UA. Not many knew that Nezu could fight, but those who did knew better than to make him mad, and the association had done just that. Many also forgot that he was an animal with a quirk, not some smart guy with an animal quirk. He opened his office door and immediately got to work. The hallway was cleared in less than a minute, then the next, then the rest of the floor he was on. In the distance he could hear the yells of Present Mike, see people getting flung by Eraserhead's capture tool, see soldiers hitting each other through the blue cloud like warp gates of Loud Cloud, and hear the shrieks of Venom Knight as they likely cleared out the immediate area in seconds. Soon, with the help of the pros in the building, and the licensed students, Nezu got UA grounds back under his complete control. He then walked back to his office, where he was met by the now licenseless heroes, including Ryukyu and Rocklock, who had come to help after fighting off similar assaults. He nodded to them, walked to his desk, and started a video conference with the head of the association, also known as the director. A.H. Nezu. To what do I owe the pleasure? Nezu. Drop the niceties, director. You know why I'm calling you. You sent a small army of soldiers to MY school who attacked MY staff and students. I understand that the meeting didn't go as planned, but that is no excuse to put children in danger. While he was doing an incredibly good job holding back his rage, it was clear that Nezu was ready to snap at any moment. Director. How unlike you, Principal. Though I guess I can see where you're coming from. I assume you also know of the non-existent licenses as well? Nezu. Of course I do. I'm Nezu, the second smartest being on Earth. The only reason I didn't foresee your little assault was because I assumed you weren't stupid enough to try it. I greatly appreciate you proving me wrong. And another thing, why? Rocklock and Ryukyu rely on their hero work to get by. Rocklock has a family to care for. Director. They should have taken that into account before siding with the parasite. The way he said parasite sounded like it was personal, like he knew Izuku. Izuku could swear he looked familiar but couldn't place a finger on where he'd seen him. He had never actually heard a host before, which meant that the man had personally known Izuku, or at least his mother, at some point. He then manifested on Nemuri's shoulder. Izuku. Who are you? You look familiar, did you know my mom? The director then laughed instead on answering his questions. Director. Wow. I didn't expect you to remember me. After all, I did leave when you were 3, but I guess even a parasite would deserve the truth. Hi there, Izuku, Daddy's home. With that final remark, the director ended the call. And left Izuku in tears. Small memories were flooding his mind. He couldn't believe his own father would want him dead, or at the very least jailed for life. Nemuri started to comfort him, which wasn't working since he was too focused on trying to rationalize the new information. So she kissed him deeply. She held it for a few seconds before moving her head from his, and hugging his head to her chest to comfort him. The little act then revealed their relationship to Rock Lock and Ryukyu, who then passed money to him. Nezu. As touching as this is, I'm afraid to say the lot of you can't stay here until the director is taken down or UA will just keep getting raided. The now not heroes nodded in recognition and left the school grounds. The class said goodbye to all of them as they left. Nemuri and Izuku led them to the only place they could think of, the Bakugo house. Once they got there, Mitsuki opened the door and let them in. They explained the situation and Masaru led them to a guest house on the property. Their lives as fugitives and vigilantes had just begun. First day. To say any of them slept soundly would be an overstatement, but the one who was really affected was Izuku. Nemuri could tell that by the way he was acting, he was dangerously close to closing himself off again. So instead of sleeping, she talked to him all night, which helped. He was upset that he was the reason all of this was happening to her and the others. She told him OT was his father's fault, not his, and after a little convincing, he believed her, and they both finally fell asleep at 3 in the morning. Because of their impromptu therapy session, they were the last of the group to get up and go downstairs to discuss their next move. Izuku was the first to speak up after manifesting. Izuku. Before we start, I just want to say sorry for being the one to drag you all into this. The other 5 heroes acknowledged his apology but reassured him that they don't blame him and would do it again. Aizawa. Now that that's over, we need to figure out where to go. It won't take long for them to check the homes of the families of 1A. Shirakumo. Since AFO is in jail, we could use one of the backup hideouts of the League. Since they attacked the MLA, I believe they merged and have started using their resources more than the League's. The rest nodded and agreed with his idea. So after saying goodbye to the Bakugos, Shirakumo opened a warp gate into an old warehouse. Rock Lock. Where are we? Shirakumo. We're in Hosa right now. If they haven't found this place yet, then they never will. It doesn't have much, but it'll keep us alive for a little while, or until we take down the director. Izuku and Ryukyu both sensed something in the darkness around them. INR. Come out, whoever you are. All of a sudden an arrow came out of the darkness towards the group, but the arrowhead looked funny. Not wanting to find out what it meant, Izuku hit it with a tendril and it exploded, which harmed him. This caused the others to jump back to areas where the mysterious archer couldn't shoot them, which failed. Ryukyu got hit by what seemed to be a taser arrow, Rock Lock and Aizawa got knocked back by another explosive arrow, and Shinso got covered by a foam arrow. Izuku and Nemuri were the only ones left. Nemuri. Remember the joint training? Izuku, good idea. He sent a tendril at the only light that was on to break it as he venomized Nemuri. Once it was dark, Venom Knight jumped up to the ceiling and spread over 30 tendrils around the warehouse to try and find him, or to lure him to them. Venom Knight also set web traps around the warehouse just in case. Nemuri, this spider's trap technique is amazing. Izuku, it better be, it took way too long to think of it. Just then they felt a tug on a tendril and immediately retracted it, to find 5 explosive arrows waiting for them. They tried to throw them but it was too late. The combined heat and sound from the arrows were enough to peel Izuku from Nemuri's face. Realizing they'd been found out, the now recovered Venom Knight dropped down and started running around the warehouse, trying to lose the archer. Then they saw a glint, as if a pair of sunglasses caught the only bit of light in the warehouse, so they pounced at it and nearly crushed the archer, who had dodged. But he wasn't any good against Venom Knight in close combat, so he went down easily. Venom Knight took his bow and quiver, wrapped him in a few tendrils and brought him back to the center of the warehouse, where Shirakumo was already fixing the broken light. Once it was fixed, everyone got up eventually to interrogate the man. Aizawa. Who are you? Why did you attack us? Who am I? Who are you? You're clearly not the League, so why are you here? Ryukyu then looked at his outfit and discarded gear. Ryukyu. Clint Barton, aka the very underground hero Hawkeye, that's who he is. I ran into him last year. He was most likely put here to watch for the League, which means this place was found. Loud Cloud. Shirakumo then apologized and said he didn't know. Hawkeye. Now can I have my questions answered? Venom Knight. We are Venom Knight, made of the combination of the heroes Midnight and Venom. Everyone here is a hero, or was until they sided with Venom when the association wanted to kill him. Our licenses were deleted from the system and now we're labeled as dangerous vigilantes. Does that answer your questions, Hawkeye? As they said this last sentence, Clint could hear their patience with him growing thin, so he just nodded. Hawkeye. Well, I guess this is the part where I go back and say nothing happened. As he said this, he was let go of and was about to leave with his stuff when he stopped and turned around. Hawkeye. You just gained an inside man, be warned, there's another hero like me, and she's way harder to convince than me. Take this and call if you ever need help. He then threw a card with his number at them as he left, which was caught by Rock Lock. They then took inventory of what was left in the warehouse for them to live off of. After that they ate and found what seemed to be living quarters for the League. They each got a small room and went to sleep, ready for whatever the next day threw at them. War incoming. It had been a couple months since their run-in with Hawkeye, and he had been helping them a lot. He had been letting them know which heroes were on their side, which ones to avoid, and had been passing messages from Nezu's contact to them. However, they still hadn't run into the hero known as Black Widow that Hawkeye had warned them of, and he couldn't find her location, so he couldn't help them avoid her either, so on that department, they were running on luck. It was also apparent that something was coming, and they didn't even need Hawkeye to know that. The heroes were acting different, on edge, as if they were sizing themselves up for something. It didn't take an idiot to figure out that a conflict was coming, and a big one too, cause ever since AFO was broken out of Tartarus a week after the UA raid, things were escalating. Crime was through the roof, and small portions of the newly renamed Paranormal Liberation Front had been cited multiple times. The group of ex-heroes hadn't stopped fighting crime, but they had to be fast whenever they did, or else a hero they didn't know would come to arrest them. Then one day their luck ran out. Nemuri woke up in the Third League base they were visiting. The heroes kept finding them, and quickly too. She was walking towards a kitchen-like area when she got tackled to the side by Hawkeye? Hawkeye. Not time to explain, but you've got to get out of here. Why? Cause Widow's here. Well, I guess that's the whole thing, huh? Come on, let's go. They then ran to get everyone else up and out. Shirakumo was about to open a gate when a small dart pricked into his neck and knocked him unconscious. Everyone then readied for a fight. Izuku venomized Nemuri. Ryukyu was ready to transform at any moment. Aizawa had his goggles down. Shinso had lightning around him signifying his quirk was on. Mike took in a deep breath, and Hawkeye knocked an explosive arrow. Then a voice could be heard from somewhere in the room. Widow. While Clint didn't take you for the gullible type, but I guess you always were on the dimmer side. An intense fight then ensued. Her quirk, Shadow Meld, allowed her to melt into the shadows and move between nearby shadows too, which prevented the group from hitting her. She, however, was able to use hit and run tactics, until Venom Knight had enough and pumped the corners full of somnambulists using their tendrils. Eventually she couldn't hold her breath long enough and fell victim to the gas. Once she woke up, she was tied to a chair in a brightly lit room. She was then told their story. Widow. I never said I didn't believe you, but you should have turned yourselves in. Venom Knight. Izuku's father would have had him killed, or all of us if we did. This way, he needs to bring the fight to us. That way we can control where we fight so no innocents get hurt. Widow. I guess I could see why that would work, but what's stopping him from just using heroes like me from taking you in your sleep? Venom Knight. The personal grudge he seems to have against Izuku is what? We have fought lunatics like him. They want to see their prey squirm and see the fear in their eyes. He'll want to break us in an all-out fight. Widow nodded, accepting the new perspective. Widow. All right, I'll help. He trusts me more than Clint anyway. There's a war brewing, though I guess you already knew that. Just know that a small faction within the association known as S.H.I.E.L.D. is growing. Our leader, Nick Fury, will support you. Good luck with taking down the director. She then spit something out of her mouth toward a light, which then broke to create a shadow. She then disappeared. After that, Hawkeye left shortly, and the group had to move again. They all had different shifts. Every few hours someone else would go patrol for crimes and non-friendly heroes in the area. That day was interesting, and now that they had proof that war was coming, they had to prepare. As they all went to sleep that night, no one had noticed the increase in greenery surrounding their new hideout. Changing sides. They woke up to the sound of breaking glass. The group of vigilantes all rushed out to the main area of the new hideout to find nothing, except for a broken window. This confused them as they all could have sworn they also heard footsteps. Izuku then noticed something thin, long, and green. He sent a tendril at it and started to pull. When that happened, the group heard a small yelp of pain as a certain vine-haired girl was dragged into sight. They all got ready to fight, but something was off. She just sat down. It was then that they got a closer look at the UA traitor. She was incredibly skinny. Her eyes were red and puffed like she was crying. Her vines looked charred and yellowish like they weren't being taken care of. She then started to cry again. Shiozaki. Please, I just want food and water. I didn't know you were here. That was the last thing she said before passing out from what looked to be exhaustion. Izuku used tendrils to pick her up and lay her down on a nearby couch. The group then discussed what they should do with her, and in the end it was decided that they should get as much information as they could. Time skipped 3 hours. Shiozaki woke up on a couch. She sat up and looked around to see the group sitting around her. Ryukyu then passed her a glass of water and a bowl of soup, both of which were gone in a matter of minutes. She knew what they wanted, and she would give what she could. Shiozaki. The League and MLA have merged, but I'm sure you already knew that. But they also have a demon on their side. He's humongous, he has multiple quirks and he cannot be stopped. He only needs 5 hours of sleep every 3 days. That's all I know. Go ahead, turn me in. I'm of no more use to you all now. Aizawa. No, you're still useful. I watched the recording of when you left. You didn't want to leave your friends, you wished to stay a hero, but your beliefs got in the way, and from what I can see, you no longer hold those same beliefs. Shiozaki. Get to the point already. Nemuri. What he's trying to say is that you can still be a hero. You were with the League for months, you know them better than anyone. The girl then started crying again at their claims, wanting to believe them, but she still had reasons why she couldn't. Shiozaki. My friends in 1B won't want me back. Look at me, I'm a mess. I can barely move my vines right now. It'll take weeks for me to get back in fighting shape. Shirakumo. You're wrong. Your friends do want you back. They haven't been the same without you. They all miss you dearly. Sure, they were mad at first, but now they're just worried about you. Speaking of, what happened to you? Shiozaki. Thank you, and it's a long story. Rock. We have time, go ahead. She then described what had happened in the last month. After the League found Gigantomachia, she had protested God working with the demon. AFO then casted her out. He didn't need her since she wasn't in UA anymore, and her quirk wasn't ideal for use in the League. That was when she stopped believing he was God and broke herself away from that delusion. She had no survival skills, she had been barely getting by. She ate maybe once a week, drank maybe 3, then she found the hideout, where she was found by the group, who also told her about why they were by themselves in an old League hideout. Izuku then materialized. Izuku. I think we speak for all of us when I say we'll need you when the war breaks out, so eat up, drink, rest, you'll need the energy vine. Her vines propped up as little as they could to show her excitement and happiness. She cried as President Mike went to get her some more food and water. The group welcomed their newest member, and planned to make sure she was able to fight before the war. Shield. A few weeks after Shiezaki's return to the heroes, she was doing a lot better. Her vines were green again, her weight had returned, and she overall looked less tired as well. During those weeks the group had been contacted by both Hawkeye and Black Widow, who were keeping track of the director's movements. One day Widow decided to pay them a visit to plan out how they're gonna take down the director. Aizawa and Shirakumo were taking stock of their supplies when she arrived. She used their shadows to get in without much suspicion from the outside, but doing so still startled the two men. She then had everyone gather up, and didn't question why Shiozaki was there. Widow. Alright, now that you're all here, we need to discuss a few things, mostly the director, but also the war. Let's start with the war. As we know, the now PLF are gaining strength and influence at an alarming rate, but that also means the war is coming sooner and sooner. I give it maybe a month before it starts right now. This information came to a surprise to most of the group, especially Shiozaki, who was convinced that Gigantomachia was their ace in the hole, so why would they need more strength? Widow. Now we move on to the director, A.K.A Midoriya. He only recently became director in the past year and a half, after mysteriously reappearing in the public eye after going missing for 14 years. His movements are a mystery, even to those like me who he trusts. The only time he'll be vulnerable, and in a place we know he'll be, is when he's performing one of his public speeches. Those, however, are heavily guarded by powerful heroes he trusts. We can try to get heroes we trust to be his guards, but that'll be hard. This meeting went on until Shiozaki saw something peculiar in a folder Widow brought of trusted heroes. She used her vines to open and flip through it. Shiozaki. Half of these heroes were part of the MLA, and now the PLF. If he's working with them, then taking him out will get him out of the way and weaken the villains. Widow. Interesting. And do you know anything else about them that'll be helpful? Shiozaki. Sladengo's an imbecile. He'll believe anything you tell him as long as he believes you're on his side. Get him on the guard, and we have an easy in. Widow smiled at the Vine girl's information. Widow. Thank you, Vine, this'll help a bunch. Oh, and I'd like you all to come with me when I leave. There's a few people I'd like you to meet. She stuck around for a while, seemingly waiting for something, until she got a call and led them outside. When they got outside, she led them to the train station and had them travel to what seemed like an old dilapidated warehouse on the far side of the city. But once they got in, they realized what it really was. A large, circular hole in the floor opened up, and a type of elevator was rising. On it was a group of soldiers and heroes. The only thing they all had in common was the symbol of a bird on the left side of their chests. Once the elevator reached the floor of the warehouse, the group split, to reveal 6 feet 185.42 centimeters, black man, with an eye patch, wearing a black trench coat, who then stepped forward. I am Nick Fury, founder of S.H.I.E.L.D. and commander of its forces. He then walked until he was only a few feet from the group. Fury. I created S.H.I.E.L.D. to be a counter to the MLA, should they ever come back, which they did. But now they've merged with the LOV into the even more dangerous PLF, who have been working with the Hero Association. Though I'm sure you already knew that. Now I'm not usually one to allow my emotions to get the better of me, and don't think any of you should be, but Midoriya, your father seems to have a grudge against you, and I believe it would be wise to let you and Midnight handle him. Now let's go, we've got an attack to plan. He led the group back to the elevator, nodded to a soldier, who pushed a button, and the elevator went down. Director's downfall. The plan was simple. Use Sladengo's stupidity to get in, then have Widow lead them towards the stage as S.H.I.E.L.D. agents surrounded the building and then charged in. What they weren't expecting was for AFO and Gigantomachia to both be backstage. Apparently this public announcement was to be the start of the war. And the group had just walked in on the symbol of evil, rehearsing his speech. Thankfully Sladengo came in handy again when he had AFO follow him to where he'd appear from. This allowed Shiozaki and Venom Knight to restrain the giant with a mixture of vines and webs, who was asleep waiting for his master's orders. Then they got the go-ahead from Fury and started their assault. The heroes on stage were knocked out by Widow's stingers, and the director was restrained by Venom Knight. The rest of the PLF forces in attendance quickly rushed the stage, but were held back by Yamada PM and Shirakumo. Aizawa was busy staring at Gigantomachia to prevent him from using any of his quirks. Rock Lock was locking up doors they couldn't cover, and Ryukyu was on a rooftop, preparing for anything or anyone to escape the building. S.H.I.E.L.D. then invaded the theater and started detaining all PLF members they could, but Fury wasn't with them, which confused even Widow. Just then the glass from the skylight shattered and Ryukyu, in dragon form, fell in while holding on to an unconscious Fury. AFO then floated down and made his entrance. AFO. Impressive, truly impressive. I didn't expect you Force Vigilantes to be able to do anything. But it was truly a misstep to believe that I couldn't keep an eye on the League's little hideaways. Gigantomachia, your master requires your assistance. Then a crash was heard as Aizawa was flung through the curtains from where the giant was. Fury could be seen regaining consciousness. Fury yelling, "Get the director out of here, he's our objective, we'll be fine, go!" Venom Knight then wrapped up the director and fled the building. They wanted to stay, to help fight, but they knew that if they did, the director would be lost, and so would the war. They had already gone 5 blocks, and were quickly about to breach 10, when a blue blast of fire came from a rooftop, and green from the cocoon they had the director in. They then landed and dropped the cocoon because of the damage the fire did. The director was then freed and stood next to Dabi. "Director, it's gonna take more than a parasite and a boar to get rid of me, thanks for the save there." Dabi, "Whatever, let's just get this over with." The green-haired man nodded and the two began their assault. Green and blue fires mixed together as Izuku was forced to retreat, but this time he thought ahead and used a tendril to pull Nemuri out of the way. She had to fight on her own, but that wasn't that bad. The two couldn't see her through their flames, so she could go around. Once she was behind them, Izuku venomized her again, and they channeled somnambulist to their mouth and created a huge cloud of gas. This surprised the fire users who were drowsy from the gas, so Venom Knight rushed them before they could recover. The director went out easily, but Dalby was a different story. He recovered and sent more flames towards them. He put his hands together to boost the flames and make them stronger. Venom Knight quickly webbed his hands together, which caused the flames to build up, almost destroy his hands. The force of the blast when the webs burst knocked him out. Venom Knight then picked up the new, and much more reinforced, cocoon and continued to the agreed drop-off point. It was hours later when everyone returned, all looking like they'd seen better days, but they were alive. Fury then spoke up. "Fury, since the director has been taken down, a new one will take his place. Most heroes have voted for Nezu, but since he already runs UA, he passed the responsibility to me. Tomorrow will be my first day as director of both S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Hero Association. I will reinstate you all." The group silently cheered, and they all went to bed that night in a SHIELD base, ready to return to their previous lives. Relatively normal. It was a few days after the capture of the director, or now just Hisashi Midoriya. Fury had become the new director, and reinstated all the deleted hero licenses, which allowed Rock Lock and Ryukyu to go back to their agencies. The rest of the group were able to return to UA as well. Fury even got the government to pardon Shiozaki since she gave valuable information and helped bring down Hisashi, and he was able to go back to Class 1B. She was welcomed back by her class, nearly tackling her to the ground in one big hug. Thankfully she was able to sidestep it. Kendo. "Shiozaki, we all miss you. Thank you for coming back. You ready to be a hero again?" Shiozaki. "Yes, I am, Mitsuka. I was a fool for believing his words and following him. I'm sorry for betraying your trust, and I hope we can all still be friends." Kendo. "Was the giant hug attempt not enough to tell you we forgive you?" Shiozaki chuckled at this, and walked with her class back to their dorms to catch up with each other. Nemuri and Aizawa were almost taken out by another mass hug from 1A, but once again got out of the way. Izuku, who was manifested, was not so lucky as he ended up underneath 20 separate people. Once they got up and apologized, he and Nemuri told them all what happened by themselves as Aizawa got in his sleeping bag, which he forgot to take. They all knew that AFO and the PLF were far from done, but with Hisashi gone and the association no longer turning a blind eye, they were slowed down and weakened significantly. Yes, they would still have to be countered, but that time was far into the horizon for now. A few days later, 1A and 1B got together to hang out at the 1B dorms. Nemuri could be seen hugging Izuku close to her chest as they watched a movie on the couch. The class of 1B had confused looks on their faces, which increased when they realized 1A and Setsuna weren't even reacting to it. Kendo. Hey Ishido, wouldn't that be a sight where you'd all suddenly go invade personal life mode? Ishido looked to where the orange-haired girl was pointing to see 1A's only couple on the couch. Ishido. Oh that? That's old news, like 4 or 5 months old news. Kendo. Really? Ishido. Yeah. Why do you think me, Toru, and Setsuna snuck away from the party? Kendo. That long ago? Wow. Ishido simply nodded as she walked over to the couch to tell the couple 1B didn't know about them yet, which made Nemuri laugh and Izuku to turn red then retract out of nervousness. He venomized Nemuri after a while though, which had the side effect of them being kicked off of the couch for being too big, and Venom Knight being themselves, got moody and went back to the 1A dorms to spend time with Eri and Inko. When they got back they devenomized and Eri came running. Eri. Papa, Mama, you're back. Do you want to see what me and Inko can do? Izuku manifested, and he and Nemuri both nodded. Eri and Inko venomized and started to crawl up the wall, but instead of getting stuck, Yuri attached a web to the ceiling and slowly came back down on it. Yuri went over to the two, devenomized, and Inko manifested T. To see their reactions. Izuku. Nice job, you're able to make webs now, that's amazing. Nemuri. I'm so proud of you two for being able to ignore your fear of heights now. Yanai, excited. Thanks Mama/Mother and Papa/Father. Nemuri and Izuku then went to make dinner for the 4 of them. Unlike their first time trying to cook katsudon together, this time they were perfectly in sync with each other. They saw the improvement as a symbol of how close they'd gotten and how much they'd been through together. Later that night, when everyone was already asleep, the couple were talking to each other about how far they'd come together and how none of it was really normal. They both eventually fell asleep, content and ready to protect their normal from anything. Preparing for war. 3 months after Hisashi Midoriya was taken down, the PLF was once again growing stronger. Fury and Nezu had started working together to prepare heroes and licensed students alike for war, as well as calling on foreign heroes for help. However, most countries refused to help Japan either for their own greedy purposes, or out of fear that they'll be too weak without some of their heroes. Nezu was currently trying to convince the Prime Minister of Norway and the President of the United States, as they were the last 2 countries. PMON. I hear what you're trying to say, Nezu. However, I cannot simply send you an army of heroes, but what I will do is send our number 5 hero to aid in your endeavors. Nezu. Thank you, Prime Minister, sir. That's more than I could ask from you. With a nod, the Prime Minister logged off to assign the nominated hero to Japan. That just left the US President. Press. Nezu, I can't send our best heroes to Japan. I apologize, but I can't. You know of our recent disagreements with Russia, which have grown in hostility, and I cannot risk being caught with our pants down. But what I can do is send you someone better. His quirk is phenomenal. However, he cannot control it. As long as he sees you and other heroes as allies, he will not harm you. Nezu. I understand, and an out-of-control ally is better than nothing. I thank you for your assistance. The President signed off to handle the transfer documents and scheduled the man's flight. In the meantime, classes 1A and 1B were training together and helping each other with new moves and costume upgrade ideas. Venom Knight was focusing on their mobility, while yes, the tendrils allowed them to swing, and Nemuri's already amazing acrobatic skills gave them great mobility. They were still very big and needed to learn how to move more carefully. They were also sparring with the classes every time someone thought they made a breakthrough with a move, except Bakugo, Todoroki, Jiro, and Monoma when he copied one of their quirks. They were all getting better, but they still couldn't beat Venom Knight. Rogers was the only one who was able to actually hurt them as well. But it didn't really help their cases considering the mental conversation that was going on left Venom Knight in autopilot most of the time, except for Rogers of course. Most if it was the couple trying to figure out what they should make for dinner that night. Nemuri, but spaghetti and meatballs is so good, Izuku, yeah, but remember how long it took to get that tomato sauce out of Eri's favorite dress? Nemuri, so yeah, what you said, steak sounds great. Izuku mentally chuckled at her changing her mind, until a blast of fire hit them in the back, which caused him to be thrown out of Nemuri's body and halfway across the gym. Nemuri yelling, "Izuku, you alright?" A small piece of goop rose what looked like a sloppy thumbs up, which made her giggle a little. She then walked over and let him rebond with her. She was quickly venomized, and Venom Knight turned to face where the fire came from. Venom Knight, "Alright, who was it? Tell us before we beat all of you into the ground." At the threat, everyone parted to show Monoma, using Todoroki's quirk. He didn't even look sorry about what he did either. Monoma, "I didn't know the all-powerful Venom Knight of 1A was so weak they couldn't take a little fire." He was then launched into a wall by a tendril, but used Tetsu's steel quirk to avoid being knocked out. Venom Knight, "If you're so smug, why don't you get over here and fight us like a man instead of using cheap shots?" Monoma, "Gladly." With that said, he rocketed forward with Bakugo's explosion. Just before he made contact with a fistful of Todoroki flames and Bakugo explosions, he was hit to this side with a flying hammer? Everyone looked to the entrance as the hammer returned to its owner, a tall, broad-shouldered, muscular man with long blonde hair wearing armor with a red cape and a winged helmet. "Sorry about the interruption, young one, but I would rather I fight one of my most powerful allies myself at full strength." Everyone looked at the man confused as Venom Knight devenomized. The man watched with interest as Izuku manifested on Nemuri's shoulder. "Ah, you must be Izuku Midoriya. I was a little confused at the description of your power, but seeing it firsthand clears it all up. And you must be Nemuri Kayama, otherwise known as Midnight. It is an honor to meet you both and fight by your side. My apologies, it seems I've forgotten to introduce myself. I am the number 5 hero of Norway, also known as Thor. My quirk allows me to control lightning. This hammer named Mjolnir is a support device made to assist me aim my lightning, and since I can control lighting, I can control Mjolnir as well." Nemuri, "Nice to meet you, Thor. We can't fight right now because of how draining it is to get separated. You can fight the other students though." Thor nodded and looked towards both classes, who all got into a fighting stance. That night, no one was really conscious enough to eat, except for Izuku and Nemuri, of course, who didn't have to fight. Thor was given one of the empty dorm rooms in one of the business course dorms. War starts. The following week was made up of the hero course classes training after normal lessons. Thor's presence caused the students to push themselves harder than before as well. Thor eventually got his fight with Venom Knight. He won, but not without them getting some very heavy hits in first. In fact, he had to visit Recovery Girl just to make sure his ribs were all intact afterwards. The man from the United States had shown up too, but he was staying with S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Hero Association, but he had visited UA when he first arrived. It turned out that instead of being a hero, he was a scientist named Bruce Banner who worked for a support company. They hadn't seen him in action yet. Actually, no one had seen his quirk, Blind Rage, for years. They only had the description of it. It allowed his anger to overtake his mind and transform him into a giant green man that went by the Hulk. It was a Monday, when a bunch of pros and all the licensed students at UA were gathered at 2 different places. Some were at the city near Jakku Hospital to evacuate civilians, and the rest were at a mansion in the mountains to raid the PLF headquarters. Izuku and Nemuri were on the front lines at the mansion. After a while, Ed Shot, who was leading the mansion team, gave the order to start. The heroes had caught the PLF by surprise. Members were just wandering the property when the small army appeared from the forest. Cementos rushed forward and began to destabilize the concrete and rip a hole into the side of the building. Before any of the villains could get to him, many were taken out by many heroes. Eventually, Cementos was able to split the mansion open. Kaminari was then seen sprinting to the front when he saw someone charging up a huge electrical attack, which he promptly absorbed. He called out that he had already rendered one heavy hitter powerless. Everyone else then got to work. Venom Knight charged through the new entrance and made short work of any PLF who got in their way. Just before a fire-based attack hit them, Mjolnir knocked out the villain as Thor joined the fray. "Thor, this day will be a long one. Be sure you don't use up all your strength here. I have a feeling you'll need it, as will I need mine." Venom Knight nodded as the Norse hero took off to handle more PLF members. To make things easier, they were using somnambulists with tendrils to take care of areas no one else was near. In the distance, the rumbles of underground passages being blocked off were heard. With any luck, that would also trap Gigantomachia, but they knew better. After a few minutes of fighting, a large rumble could be felt, as Gigantomachia emerged from the floor, carrying the original Love on his back minus Shigaraki. He was destroying the mansion, and crushing many heroes underfoot. He was headed towards the direction of the hospital, which caused everyone to realize that, whatever AFO and Shigaraki were doing, it was done, and they needed to stop the giant. Just as Gigantomachia was about to get past the only mountain separating the two places, a brightish green man smashed into the giant's face. The Hulk landed on the ground and roared at Gigantomachia. "Hulk! Hulk smash puny giant!" He then jumped back on top of Gigantomachia to keep pounding on him, only to be interrupted by Dobby and Spinner. He swatted the villains away like flies and kept hitting Gigantomachia, which was doing less than he intended because of all the quirks AFO's minion had. Thor, however, had come to his aid and they were able to slow him down, but he kept moving. Even with Cementos and Kamui Woods restraining him, he kept moving. He was almost at the, now destroyed, hospital and city where Shigaraki was fighting Gran Torino and Ryukyu with his quirks erased by Eraserhead, and AFO was being kept busy by Endeavor and Hawks. Venom Knight had to jump onto his face and continuously pump somnambulist gas into his nose and mouth to finally stop him. Back in the city, Shigaraki's brute strength was enough to fight off both pros and Shinso, who unlocked yet another power. Eventually he was able to get away, and AFO warped himself to Shigaraki once he was far enough away. The Love also managed to get away, and were assumed to have been warped to at some point. But the heroes ultimately called that day a victory, even with their losses. The PLF was significantly weakened with most of their forces arrested in the mansion, and Gigantomachia was finally in custody. There was a special cell in Tartarus made for villains of his size, where he was put. He was allowed free reign of the cell as they couldn't get quirk canceling cuffs big enough for him, which was fine since the canceling tech was built into the cell itself. The war was far from over. The heroes could tell that even though they won, the villains had only become stronger. Everyone went to bed, awaiting the next battle. Unwanted aid. A week after the first battle of the war, everyone had been discharged from the hospital. The students of 1A were in their dorms, waking up for another day of classes and training. That was until they heard Mineta yelling and banging on everyone's doors. When they opened up their doors, they saw a letter at their feet. The letter was from Shinso, explaining his power, one for all, and why he had left. They all met in the common space to talk about it, but when they got there, Nezu, Nemuri, All Might, and Aizawa were already there. Nezu. I see you found Shinso's letters. Yes, everything on there is true. No, we will not allow you to go after him. The class began to shout and ask why they couldn't. Aizawa. You can't follow Shinso because he's being targeted by Shigaraki and AFO. From the reports we had from the heroes who actively fought Shigaraki, he seems to have been given the AFO quirk itself. That is what makes it too dangerous for you to go. Shinso can handle himself and has multiple of the top 10 pros along with Thor aiding him. That was nowhere close to satisfying the students, but they knew there was no fighting their teachers. They weren't the only ones worried for Shinso though. In fact, there was a certain couple planning to help him anyway. Izuku, are you sure? You could get fired, you know that, right, Nemi? Nemuri, I'm well aware, Aizu, but if I know Shinso, his emotions will get the better of him and he'll go rouge at some point. Besides, I can tell you wanted to. Izuku mentally sighed but agreed with her. After the small class meeting was over, Nemuri went over to the support department to enlist the help of a certain pink-haired inventor. When they got there, Izuku dragged Hatsum to a secluded spot with his tendrils. Hatsum. Hey, why'd you take me away from my babies? Nemuri. Because we need your help. Surely you already know that Shinso left UA, right? The mention of her best friend quieted the girl down immediately. Hatsum. Yeah, I got a letter under my dorm room door this morning. What does that have to do with NET? Bahoo. I'd love to help you help Shinso. Nemuri. Good. All we need right now is a secure communication device so we can contact you. Hatsum quickly nodded and went over to her baby pile, pulled out 2 radios, and handed one to Nemuri. Hatsum. These are long-range, ultra-secure radios. They only start to lose each other once one leaves the country. Nemuri nodded her thanks, clipped the radio to her belt, and left the support department. She could later be seen walking out of the UA gates, but after that, no one had seen her. Over the course of 2 weeks, they had Hatsum make them a tracker, which Izuku was able to sneak onto Shinso the one time they had seen him. He looked like a monster, his black whips flowing over him like a second skin, branching out from his back, and his mask looked cracked. They didn't intervene directly until it was clear he couldn't fight against a villain whose quirk let him control nearby civilians. He was overwhelmed, he was weak from not eating or sleeping, and he couldn't harm the people. So Venom Knight stepped in and rushed the villain themselves. It wasn't much of a fight, they landed in front of him as knocked him into a nearby building, which took him out. The civilians then dispersed, and Shinso walked over to Venom Knight. Shinso. What are you doing here? You're in danger, there could be another assassin around the corner. Venom Knight. Yeah. We're not gonna deal with this. Shinso looked confused, but then looked like he knew what was coming, as a tendril-leaking somnambulist hit him in the head, knocking him out. Venom Knight then picked him up. Venom Knight. Let's get you back to UA. A few hours later Venom Knight walked into UA, carrying Shinso on their shoulder. The citizens being kept safe in UA were outraged that they'd bring the villain's target back, but were shut up by a snarl from Venom Knight and a speech from Uraraka. When he woke up he tried to leave but was immediately webbed up by Venom Knight until he ate and rested. Collapse of UA. Shinso had been kept at UA, recovering for a few days. He had eventually given up on leaving since the class wasn't going to let him. During his stay his parents had come to check on him, and scold him for leaving the safety of UA. It wasn't only Shinso's parents who showed up though. UA had recently become a shelter for civilians when the League had broken criminals out of nearly every prison in the country. Not all of the people that were broken out were villains though. Many captured vigilantes and other violent hero-sided people were released, Stain being the biggest and most active of them all. Ever since he was broken out of Tartarus alongside AFO, many of the escapees had been found dead or severely injured, along with a few heroes as well. He even saved a few heroes from Nomus that had been released to bait out Shinso. A new routine had been developed by the Hero Course students. They would help the support department with upgrades to the UA's security system in the morning. In the afternoon they would have class to try and keep up in their academics, and they'd use whatever time was left to train. While Izuku and Nemuri were gone, the Bakugos were taking care of Eri and Inko. Mitsuki often looked exhausted at the end of the day because she usually had to deal with Yuri running around the whole time Nemuri and Izuku were away. Then one day that all changed. It started out normal enough, students rushing to and fro, getting supplies, working on projects, and training. The support students all focused on their work, hero students doing any heavy lifting, business students calculating supply needs, and Gen Ed students filling in where they were needed. UA was a well-oiled machine of a community. Even the civilians had found their purpose in keeping each other calm and occupied. Nemuri was standing on top of one of UA's walls, overlooking the nearby area, making sure no threats were lurking about. Just as she was about to walk away, Nemuri noticed something coming at her, and apparently Izuku didn't see it fast enough either, cause the next thing either of them see is the ground and then darkness. When they awoke, all they could see was fire and twisted metal. No corpses, thankfully. Then they heard a scream, not of fear, but of anger. They venomized and quickly ran over to find that Bakugo was trying to fight off both Dabi, with newly healed hands, and Toga. He was having a hard time considering he was also defending 3 other people. They looked to be Jiro's parents and an unconscious Aoyama. Why those 4 were together was a question for later. Venom Knight quickly jumped into action. A tendril grabbed Dabi and threw him into a wall. They then webbed him up as Bakugo was finally able to take down Toga and turn to them. Bakugo, yelling, "Where the hell have you 2 been?" Venom Knight, "We were knocked out before this happened, don't blame us, what happened anyway?" Apparently when the couple got knocked out, shit hit the fan. The front gate was blown to bits by what seemed to be a very large bomb. Then the League and a large amount of PLF members charged in. As far as Bakugo knew, there had been no casualties, and neither AFO nor Shigaraki were there. When asked where the others were, Bakugo revealed that most people had been evacuated, but he stayed to defend any stragglers, which happened to be the three behind him. Venom Knight just nodded at the explanation and picked up Aoyama with a few tendrils. Bakugo helped up the gyrus and they were on their way. They did have to fight off a few groups of PLF on the way to the back exit, but they made it eventually. Just as they left, a huge crash could be heard. When they looked back, the gigantic H-shaped building known as UA was lopsided, burning, and constantly breaking down. They looked back once more when they were near the drop-off point for the evacuation, but all they saw was the final collapse of UA. The final battle PT-1. It had been a week since UA's collapse. The civilians inside its grounds had been relocated to nearby shelters and lesser-known hero schools. Most students were similarly spread throughout Japan, except for the Hero Corps students. They stayed with their teachers to keep themselves organized. They had been slowly moving throughout Japan, taking out villains as they went. Eventually they were able to make it to Shiketsu and work with the pros and students there. After only a few days of staying there, the school was hacked, and every screen displayed the new helmet of AFO. AFO. Hello heroes, pros and students alike, you already know who I am, and I assume what I am after. Hitoshi Shinso, this is your last chance to give me OFA without any more blood spilled. Aizawa. AFO. You know we won't give it to you. You're a fool to think we just give OFA up. AFO. Well, it doesn't matter really, I'll get it either way. I was just giving you all a more peaceful option. Oh, and Shiozaki, don't think I've forgotten your betrayal. You show your face in the coming battle, and you won't survive. The screens then all returned to normal as AFO signed off. Just after AFO's appearance, all pros and licensed hero students held a meeting to talk about what happened. Most were wondering what AFO meant by the coming battle. They didn't get to ponder long as midway through the meeting, a news station came onto the TV, showing AFO, Shigaraki, the League, and the remaining PLF members destroying a city. Shigaraki then jumped to the news copter that was filming to address the camera directly. Shigaraki. Come if you dare, heroes. He started laughing before punching the camera. The audio, however, was still active, and all of Japan heard the screams of the news crew as the helicopter crashed into the ground. Time skipped 2 hours. After the broadcast ended, most pros had made their way towards Osaka, where the destruction was. They were originally going to get together and plan an attack on the villains, but because of the direct threat and invitation, that was thrown out the window. So there they were, nearly half of all pro heroes, with the number growing by the second, staring down the most dangerous villains Japan, no the world, had ever seen, with no plan except, hit them harder than they hit you. Even heroes from other countries had been sent as their nations now saw the threat that AFO truly posed. There was a Canadian hero whose quirk gave him metal claws, a hero from a small European country known as Latveria who wore a suit of lightweight metal armor who could send out energy blasts from his hands. And even a hero who could stretch his body, although the rest of his team couldn't come. They may have had less numbers than their enemy, but they were powerful. Then Shinso stepped up to be in front of the heroes. If AFO was leading the villains, it would only be fitting if the heroes were led by OFA. Shinso. Last chance AFO, surrender now and this can end painlessly. AFO, however, knew better than to answer the purple-haired boy. So instead he used his radio wave quirk to answer through the hero's comms. AFO. Nice try. And no thank you. No matter how skilled you all are, this is an army of people who have trained their quirks, just one would be a problem. If you think you all can beat us, then I implore you to try. Shinso. Very well. Yelling your reign of tyranny ends here AFO, for one of us shall stand. AFO yelling. And one of us shall fall. The final battle PT2. The two sides charged at each other, Shinso, or leader right now, and AFO clashed as their respective sides ran into the other, and an all-out brawl began. A few minutes into the battle, Loud Cloud opened up giant warp gates and sent portions of both sides to different locations. AFO and Shigaraki were isolated from each other. Leader and Hulk were sent with AFO, and Endeavor, Hawks, Ryukyu, and Eraserhead went with Shigaraki. Midnight, Venom, and Rock Lock were sent to fight the League. As the portal disappeared, the villains found themselves facing the heroes in a rocky, mountain-like area. Thinking quickly, Dabi started to throw his flames towards Midnight, who was able to evade most of them but got a burn on her arm. Toga rushed toward Rock and started swinging. She almost hit him, which was when he locked her clothes in place, stopping her from moving. Dabi. Damn, I was hoping the flaming bastard would be here. Beggars can't be choosers, I guess. When Dabi stopped his onslaught, Venomized Midnight, and Venomite entered the fight. All of a sudden, a giant blade made of blades almost hit them, but Venomite was able to duck under it. When they looked at the owner, they saw Spinner start to change. He was getting bigger, and he was growing tougher scales all over his body. Spinner. With these new quirks from Shigaraki and AFO, I'll finally be able to spin their dreams into reality. When his transformation was over, he was easily at least 2 stories tall. His sword now looked like a simple knife for him. Spinner, dumb with quirks, yelling, "Me crush heroes!" As he yelled, he lifted his arms and smashed down directly where Venomite was. They had no choice but to catch his arms, but his new weight and strength were too much for Venomite's enhanced body. Venomite sent out a tendril from their back, which stuck to the ground, and pulled themselves back as hard and fast as they could. Now out of Spinner's reach, they quickly jumped onto his back and started pounding, but the scales were too tough. They'd need to concentrate a lot of strength on just one, which wasn't going to be a possibility with other league members still in the fight. Deciding to deal with him later, Venomite had him breath in some somnambulous gas, and used a nearby boulder to knock Spinner off of a nearby cliff. It wasn't that high, but not even this new Spinner could hope to come out of that fall anywhere near conscious. As they jumped back into the fight, Rock was about to be compressed by Mr. Compress. Venomite quickly sent a tendril to knock him away. As they did this, the tendril accidentally broke the man's prosthetic arm, and knocked him into a tree. At this point, the last member of the league still in fighting shape was Dabi, who was giving Rock a hard time. This is when Venomite decided to try out a new idea. They made a small ball of symbiote goo in their hand and pumped it full of somnambulist. When they threw it, Dabi's flames destroyed the goo, which allowed the gas to escape and envelope him. When it dissipated, Dabi was unconscious. Rock and Venomite quickly put quirk-canceling cuffs on the league. The hardest part was dragging Spinner back up and breaking enough scales to put the cuffs on. Rock. Man, wish I was able to do more. I know we won, but all I did was stop Toga and distract Dabi. Venomite. It's just because this wasn't a good matchup for you. But still, Toga's quite dangerous. You should be proud you got her. The pro nodded at them as they called in that the league had been apprehended. Another warp gate opened and Venomite dragged the league through the warp gate. The gate led to a lesser-known hero school which was being used as a temporary jail for any captured villains. When the league was locked up, the 2 heroes went through different gates to help at other places. As Midnight stepped through the next warp gate, she landed in a grassy field. A PLF member was about to hit her when Thor came crashing down, hitting them away. Thor. Glad you 2 could join us. I suggest you venomize so we can get this over with quicker. No doubt other areas could use our help. Midnight nodded as Venom quickly covered her. They jumped right into the action. The fight was already starting to wind down when they got there, but their assistance caused the conflict to end in just a few minutes. A new warp gate opened, and both Venomite and Thor walked through. They didn't expect what they saw on the other side. A massacre. The final battle, PT3, the end. All that could be seen was complete devastation. AFO and Shigaraki were standing together. Heroes were scattered around, like they were toys after a child's temper tantrum. Many were unconscious, others weren't gonna wake up. AFO had Ryukyu by the throat, and Shigaraki was moments from touching Leader's head. Thor quickly threw Mjolnir at Shigaraki and launched him away from Leader, as Venomite sent a tendril towards AFO. The tendril wrapped around the wrist of the hand which held Ryukyu, and squeezed hard enough to make him let go. They then grabbed Ryukyu, went back to the gate, and put her through, then it closed. Thor called Mjolnir back and flew after Shigaraki. AFO. The famous Venomite, come to face me. The last time we saw each other was the night you ripped the entire Hero Association from my grasp. I'll ensure you that you will not get in my way again. He flew towards Venom Knight with many of his strength enhancer quirks active. When they clashed, Venom Knight was launched by AFO, but something was wrong. Venom was being peeled from Midnight as she flew. She landed and looked at AFO. He was holding Venom in his hand, and Venom didn't look all that happy. AFO. Let's see how strong you two are without the other. He used his strength quirks to throw Venom far away from the fight. Midnight yelling Izuku. AFO laughed at her distress. Before she could do anything, he leapt at her. Just as his fist made contact, another voice was heard, a capture tool just like Eraserhead's wrapped around his arm, and his helmet was met with a steel boot. Leader Manchester Smash. The kick sent AFO back a few meters, allowing Midnight to recover from her shock. She got up and ripped the forearms of her costume off. Leader. No, go find Venom. I can hold him off for now. Midnight. No. You're my student. I can't just let you fight him alone. Eyes of Venom's strong. He can make it back on his own. Besides, even if he can't, Thor should be able to get him to us. Leader nodded and got ready to fight AFO one last time. The man got up off the ground and, without saying anything, shot towards the two heroes. He activated spear-like bones, which broke through his skin as he thrusted his hands towards them. Leader's thicker costume was able to stop his bones from going too deep, but Midnight's did no such thing. A deep hole was punched into her shoulder, but she was able to get some somnambulous gas into his helmet's breathing tube. His bones suddenly retracted, his strength weakened as the gas stunned him. Leader punched him away. He used Rivet Stab to catch himself as he recovered from the gas. He stood up fully and began to talk. AFO. Surprised? Did you really think I wouldn't have at least one quirk-resistant quirk? Or maybe... He was interrupted when a pale, white-haired man crashed into him. Suddenly Thor landed next to the heroes. Thor. Sorry about being late, I was preoccupied. Where is Venom? Midnight. AFO tore me and him apart. He threw him in that direction. I don't know how much longer he can last. Please get him. Thor nodded and flew off in the direction she pointed at. The two villains got back up and got ready to fight the heroes. AFO and Shigaraki were back together. They leapt at Midnight and Leader, but before they could make contact, AFO's helmet was covered in a glob of green goo and Leader used his secondary vocal cords to sound like the man. AFO Leader. Tamura, get this stuff off of me, will you? Shigaraki. Yes, Sens. Leader. Walk over to the nearest city and turn yourself in. Shigaraki then walked away from the battle, leaving only AFO. Midnight then recognized the goo, but it was too small to be Venom. That's when the small glob broke apart, to reveal somnambulous gas. Thor then landed next to Midnight and held his hand out. Just then Venom leaked out of his hand and jumped towards Midnight, who gladly caught him and let him rebond. Venom, good to be back. Midnight chuckled and responded. Midnight. And it's nice to have you back. Now let's finish this. The two venomized once more. Venom Knight let out a loud shriek as AFO got back up. Venom Knight yelling. Come on, let's get this over with, Mr. Potato Head. AFO yelling. Grr. What did you just say to me? No one disrespects the symbol of evil and gets away with it. AFO charged the three heroes, but now that they were all together, he stood no chance. Thor threw Mjolnir to stop his approach. Venom Knight leapt up and used multiple tendrils to smack him into the ground, breaking his helmet in the process, and Leader used what looked to be two new speed-based powers to kick him even further. Leader then used his black whips to launch him into the air, calling out a name for the move. Leader yelling. Black Whip Midnight Catapult. Thor summoned a gigantic bolt of lightning to strike AFO. Thor yelling. Rage of the Thunderer. Venom Knight sent a massive amount of tendrils, all channeling Somnambulist, to hit him back down towards Leader. Venom Knight yelling, Drowsy Downfall. Leader then jumped a little to get some momentum, and wound up the biggest kick he'd made yet. The other two could feel the power increase as he pushed every helpful quirk he had to their limits, and jumped the percentage he was using straight to 100%. Leader yelling. One for all, full cowling, true 100%, United Nations of Smash. To say AFO was dead after that kick would have been a hopeful fantasy. Yes, it should have killed him, but his regenerative quirks kept him alive. Though he wasn't conscious, far from it, he would be in a coma for months at the very least. After the battle was over, the four heroes, or three since Venom Knight was still venomized, all looked at each other, well except Leader. He couldn't stand because of his broken leg. A warp gate opened and police officers and heroes came out to apprehend AFO and help Leader to Recovery Girl. The war was over. AFO had lost for the final time. Yes, Japan had to rebuild, but the bunkers required by every hero's school would keep the people sheltered until homes were rebuilt. Epilogue. It has been 5 years after the war ended. AFO and Shigaraki had both been locked up in separate cells in Tartarus. The foreign heroes went back to their countries after the final battle as well. Many cities were destroyed during the war as well, leading to massive reconstruction efforts, though thankfully due to Cementas and other heroes who could create or manipulate construction materials, it only took a couple of years instead of multiple decades. Japan had also begun to economically recover after paying for so many materials to keep civilians safe. Though the war was won, there were many casualties. Most were heroes. Some heroes even had to retire, like Eraserhead, who lost an eye and a leg while fighting. Miruko had even lost 3 of her limbs, though she had refused to retire and bought prosthetics that could keep up with her remaining leg. In those 5 years, Class 1A and 1B had graduated, and took over most of the top 40 spots, though some weren't as popular, but they were all in the top 100. A few pros such as Ryukyu and Endeavor were able to retain their ranks. Venom Knight had actually gotten very popular throughout those years. Speaking of Venom Knight, Izuku and Nemuri had actually gotten married. Izuku ended up taking Nemuri's name, making him Izuku Kayama, to distance himself even further from his father. They had also officially adopted Eri as well. Just a year after they got married, Nemuri got pregnant and they had a son, who had Nemuri's head shape and eyes but had Izuku's freckles and hair color. They named him Minji. The class was able to meet Minji during a small unofficial reunion they planned. Izuku and Nemuri weren't able to keep Ishido away from him as they planned. Eri was 12 and Inko was technically 5, but because of her bond with Eri, was mentally 12 as well. Their bond had only grown throughout the years and it was rare for them to be at home devenomized. It would often freak out new guests whenever Yuri came out. They both wanted to be heroes. They even already thought out individual hero names. Inko had planned to be called Mayhem, and Eri used her quirk as her name, Rewind. After the classes graduated, Fury had actually called upon both Rogers and Stark. He apparently also called in heroes from other countries to make a team. They had become very popular and successful, although there were many who would oppose the international team. Izuku and Nemuri had also started their own agency. Yes, Nemuri already had hers, but she shut it down so they could make one for both of them. Nemuri and Izuku's own bond had become perfect over time. They would never be seen apart, not like they were before either. The world was at peace once more, or at least as close to peace as it could be, and it was only getting better. Crime wasn't gone, it never would be, but without organizations like the League and the MLA running around, it was much quieter. Yes, another would eventually rise, but that would be dealt with when it showed itself. One day Eri came home from her school crying. Inko clearly wasn't enough to calm her down, so Nemuri sat her down as Izuku manifested. Izuku. Honey, what's wrong? What happened? Eri, crying. They said that the only reason I could be a hero was because of Inko and you guys. They even said someone with my power was nothing more than a villain. Nemuri quickly hugged Eri. She and Izuku knew her involvement, even if unwanted, with the deleter rounds would cause some backlash. But they didn't expect that. Nemuri. Well, they're just wrong. But if you want this to stop, you'll have to prove them wrong. Besides, you and Inko don't need to listen to them. Show the two of you are strong by showing how strong you two are alone. Get into a hero's school without venomizing, and you'll show them they're wrong. This seemed to cheer Eri up, and her and Inko venomized. Yuri. Thank you, Mom and Dad. They then walked off to their room to do their homework and wait for dinner. Izuku. They'll be okay, Nemuri, I know it. Nemuri. I know, it's just so hard to watch them grow so fast. Especially when I'm already 36. Izuku. You don't look a day over 30 and you know that. Nemuri chuckled. Nemuri. Thanks. I love you, Izu. Izuku. I love you too, Nemi. Christmas special. Nemuri woke up in her and Izuku's dorm room. She saw snow falling outside their window. She could feel him wriggling in excitement inside her. He quickly reminded her what day it was and nearly made her shoot out of the bed. Nemuri. Whoa, calm down, Izu. Izuku, but Nemi, it's Christmas. She chuckled and left the room, quickly heading towards the common room to meet with the rest of the class. She sat down to eat breakfast and talk with the students. Soon enough, Eri came down with Inko manifested on her shoulder, both looking tired. Yanai. Mama/mother, Papa/father, what's going on? Izuku excitedly manifested on Nemuri's shoulder. Izuku. It's Christmas, that's what. Eri. What's Christmas? Inko. Yeah, there's nothing in Eri's memories about this Christmas thing. Nemuri. Well, you have today to get to know it then. You'll have fun, we promise. The younger pair grew excited smiles and ran over to have breakfast too. Inko retracted as Eri ate, clearly wanting to preserve energy for the rest of the day, and Izuku did the same. They took Eri over to the Christmas tree in the common space which had presents underneath. Before the class started their full gift exchange, Nemuri handed Eri 2 wrapped boxes, one for her and one for Inko. Eri. What do I do? Nemuri. You rip up the wrapping paper to reveal what's underneath. That's your present. Eri. And I get to keep it? Nemuri hugged the little girl. Nemuri. Of course you do, Snowball. Eri ripped into the wrapping paper to reveal a doll set she saw on the TV one time and wanted. Then Inko manifested and used tendrils to open hers, revealing a set of hero figures of heroes they remember her being interested in. The two venomized into Yuri and hugged the now venomized Venom Knight tightly. When they separated, they devenomized and let Siro attach his tape to the presents underneath the tree. Both Izuku and Nemuri got a piece of tape and pulled. Izuku received a blanket the Shinso bought, and Nemuri pulled Jairu's gift of a guitar. Soon after, everyone started leaving to go to their families, but Bakugo stayed behind. Soon after, the door opened and closed. When Nemuri turned around, her and Izuku saw the Bakugos walk into the dorms. They were both carrying 2 presents. They walked over to the couch Nemuri and Eri were sitting on and sat across from them. Mitsuki. We just wanted to drop these off. We know you guys don't have anywhere to go, so we came here to give these to you. Mitsuki gave Eri the presents she was carrying as Masaru gave Nemuri the ones he was carrying. Masaru. These are for you and Izuku. The other 2 are for Eri and Inko. Go ahead and open them, guys. Izuku opened his to reveal an All Might figure. Nemuri's held a green scarf. Eri opened hers, which turned out to be a purple scarf, and Inko's was a Miko figure, which they had seen her eye whenever a clip of her showed on TV. Both venomized and hugged the Bakugos. They let go, devenomized, and sat down to talk for a few hours. Soon they had to leave. Mitsuki and Masaru grabbed Katsuki and left, saying goodbye. Later, Izuku and Nemuri put Eri and Inko to bed, then heading to their own room. Nemuri laid down, getting comfy, and she felt Izuku settling down too. Izuku, good night, Nemi, I love you. I had a great Christmas today. Nemuri. Today was great for me too, Izu. Good night, I love you too. They both fell asleep, Christmas cheers still flowing through them.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.